Can I just say something about Andrea?
Welcome back, everybody. Good to be home. Good to be home. Not that Los Angeles isn't kind of nice little just step away from the ordinary this time of the year. Get that little extra warm weather and stuff like that. But I have to say, this is the best time of the year here at home. The nice early part of the spring, and we have a beautiful day outside. So I am glad to be home, particularly because yesterday was just not really awesome for an awful lot of reasons. It wasn't our best day in court. For the last day, you always kind of hope to end on a high note. And that really didn't happen in this case. I think a big part of the problem that has just plagued this case from the inception was that decision to forego opening statements, because at the end of the day, the close of the evidence, it's quite confusing what's been established and what the point of any of this was. So we didn't get the kind of conclusion that you like, where, there's just a real kind of crystallization of the positions of the parties and their respective strength and an ability to really even predict what the judge is making of all of this and where he's likely to go with it. It was also bad because I got food poisoning the last day there in court. And so I had a pretty miserable afternoon, but all better now. Just one of those things that kind of comes and goes, but not my best flight home ever. But we started off the day kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like everybody had sort of just run out of steam at this point. And this was reflected in the style update. So Alice was wearing the same skirt we've seen before. It's this like denim quilt, crazy quilt, like a couple different patterns on it. Just another one of the midi skirts. The same short black jacket she was wearing yesterday, the same manky tank. The main difference today was she was wearing these black trainer shoes, not the boots. She left the boots at home this time. She wore trainers. It just seemed like a little bit of a excuse me for a second. Just seemed like a little bit of a kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say like giving up on the appearances or anything like that, but just a little bit of a downgrade. And then the other thing that was kind of shocking is that it looked like she wasn't wearing any lipstick at all. Which I don't think I've ever seen. You've seen sometimes she'll tone down to, like a nice coral tone or something like that. She doesn't always wear that garish, fire engine red. But I don't think I've ever seen her in what really looked like no lipstick at all. But she did yesterday. And I also noticed that she was extremely fidgety, like really, really all day yesterday. Before we're waiting for court, it's just the scarf. The scarf is being pulled out of the bag. It's being folded. It's being opened up. It's being put down. It's being fiddled with the water bottle. Pick up the water bottle, unscrew the cap, screw the cap back on, put it down without taking a drink, open it back up, take a drink, put it down, fiddle some more with the scarf, fiddle with the jacket, tug at the clothing, grab a Kleenex, wipe, and then grab another Kleenex and do nothing with it but like crumple it up. So suppose we can draw our own conclusions from that, but just kind of noticeable as it just looked like everybody's kind of at the point of being ready for all of this to be done. Ioan still in the navy blue. Nothing really new or interesting to report there. So the court is called to order right on time. Joe had estimated that he was going to have about or slightly less than an hour to finish up his 776 and then cross-examination of Alice. Janina estimated that she would have about 30 minutes of rebuttal, but of course that's always it depends, right? Depends on what the other side does. So it's hard to be real precise about things like that. And then Joe let the court know he would have a bit of a rebuttal case to make with Ioan. But no other rebuttal witnesses called, which was a little disappointing to me because I would have liked to have heard from Wayne Mejia. But I don't actually know if Wayne Mejia is like even still around or available or what. We know that he stopped. He was the financial manager first for Ioan and then for Alice and Ioan during the marriage. And Alice, of course, threw him under the bus as her excuse for why her prenup disclosures were not accurate. So I would have loved to have heard Wayne's version of this story, but that was not to be. We just got rebuttal from Ioan. As far as the timing of the day, remember the judge was quite eager to be done early. It's a long holiday weekend. People might have things that they could be doing with their families. So he wanted to know an estimate of when everybody expected the proceedings would be done for the day. Joe thought we would be done by noon. And Janina thought that it would just depend on how much rebuttal was necessary. But so they did kind of confirm they plan to leave early, and they're not expecting to do closings today. So just whenever the evidence is going to be done, they will be done, and they will come back for closing arguments. The judge also did confirm what I had kind of suspected, which is that it anticipated taking the matter under submission, not ruling from the bench. The court's going to issue a written decision. And that's in part because there are intricacies with a case like this. A lot of assets have to be characterized and all of that type of thing. And he may need to review the transcripts as well as part of his preparation and ability to make those decisions. He also gave a little bit of advice, I guess. It wasn't like an admonishment or warning or anything like that, but just a kind of request, which he then followed up at the end, which sort of reiterated for me that there's just been an issue with the structure of how this whole thing has been presented and his ability to really follow what's going on and why any of this matters. He asked that they all be comprehensive in their argument to address each and every point that is in dispute, but also please to outline what is not in dispute. And this is generally a good strategy for your closing, yes. But it really highlighted for me how he really needs this. He's asking the parties very specifically, please give this to me. And it makes me suspect that's because he doesn't get it yet. He's really still just unclear about what am I deciding and what matters and what doesn't and all of that. So that was a little bit kind of disheartening, because I think a lot of that, again, it just could have really been minimized by having an opening statement. The whole purpose, the structure of the trial follows the very common sense outline for speaking, argument, things like that, position papers. Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell it to them, and then tell them that you told it to them. And that's what an opening allows you to do. You tell the court, here's what it's about, here's what's coming, here's how I'm going to show it to you. You go through and you show it to them, and then you go in your closing and you point out, I told you I was going to show you this, I showed you this, and here's how I win. And so it just helps keep things organized as you're going through the process. And it also presents it makes it look consistent. It makes it look prepared. And the more consistent you are, the more persuasive it is. The more it looks like, you've got your case figured out. You're solid. So we don't have that here. The judge has several times expressed a little bit of confusion about what's going on. And so put out this kind of last call plead for, in your closings, could you please tie this together for me? Because I need to know both what is in dispute and how I'm going to rule on that. But I'm also not clear on what we're not arguing about. So Alice was resworn then to complete her cross-examination. We started with my notes are. We started with just some more exhibits. A bunch of exhibits came in. There was a request for production that was associated with a hearing on July 23rd of 2025. Alice doesn't recall if she complied with it or not. A notice to appear and produce documents. Inventory. There's an inventory of documents that she did produce that was filed. Not sure what any of this is. Still not really sure why any of this matters. But we are starting off already with, just more of the kind of helpless. I'm just confused about everything and the overacting, the dramatics. Joe asked her, for example, do you remember receiving this notice to appear and produce? No, I'm just, and so he asked, would it refresh your recollection to see it? Well, and then, so she's shown it. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of does. Just like the demeanor, it's just so noticeable. Still over the top. There's a little bit of a discussion about this one, the inventory of production that's being offered, because Janina says these are all subject to a protective order. I think this might have been like some of the disclosure from CAA or something like that. And Joe clarifies, I only want the inventory in. He's not asking for the full production to be admitted. So the inventory of what was produced comes in. Then another request to produce records to Alice in September of 2024. And she remembers being sent that document. And then there was a response that was provided that she signed. All of these documents come into evidence. Joe then says, we've finished my 776 part. And so he wants to move on to cross. I have to assume that he's got some plan for why we are using, what do we need these documents for in the case in chief part, the main like primary asset division support stuff, part of this trial that's going on right now, because it did not become clear at all from the questioning, why does any of this matter? What is any of this about? It seems to me that this is the type of thing that normally would go to an argument for sanctions or, attorney fees, something like that, because it's going to litigation conduct or, failures to produce or something like that. But I really don't know. I don't know why these are offered. I don't know how these fit into the framework of what the case is about. And there was nothing about the process of questioning and bringing them in that gave any sort of clue as to why any of this matters. She wasn't asked questions about, for example, like, are there any other documents that you didn't produce? Or, yeah, I don't know. I'm at a loss. I don't know what these mean. So Joe says, I'd like to move on to cross. Judge is like, go ahead. So he first says, I have two or three questions about your testimony yesterday. Remember, I had a whole lot of questions about Alice's testimony. I had all those stars in my margin. I'm like, I got a lot of things we're going to go back and chit chat about. Didn't get most of those. get most of those. Joe wants to know, first off, a few questions about the visit to Australia, where she went just after Ella was born, and they spent 5 months in Australia. She had testified that she received offers to audition in LA during that time. And Alice indicates that although that they, she wasn't available to work, but they did make a couple of tapes. They did do some taping while they were there. But she said, so, she did respond to a couple of auditions with tapes during that time away. But she says it's the way that it works with the taping is that if you tape an audition, you're still going to have to go in person at some point if they express some kind of interest in you. So that apparently was like the problem with auditioning from Australia, is that you might actually have to go in person. And so this like automatically jumped out to me as, so then why are you submitting any tapes at all? If your point is I'm stuck in Australia and I'm not going to go back to LA for 5 months, and I can't follow up if they have interest in me from my tapes, then why are you doing any tapes at all? I don't know. I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And of course, she doesn't remember anything about what auditions she did. She says she also did some with her friend Sylvia, who was also an actress. And she remembered they did a taped audition for a sitcom with Joey from Friends. And but she didn't remember specifically any auditions either that she did or that she declined. She said that there were a couple that were procedurals, but most of the things she was auditioning for were pilots, and so they probably, many of them didn't actually end up even going to air, didn't get picked up or something like that. So just no memory of any of that stuff, any of those details. As Joe is asking her these questions, I'm thinking, is this what this production, getting these exhibits in was related to? Is there impeachable stuff in here from her CAA records about what she was doing, what she was being offered, and so forth? Things that could refresh her about what was going on? I don't know, because none of it was put into evidence. And so I guess we're going to just have to wait and see what, if anything, comes of all of that. But we just accepted Alice's lack of memory as her testimony, basically, at that point in time. And, that can be fine if it's a thing that doesn't really matter anyway. And it's just kind of going to, credibility, the witness's reliability and good faith and so forth. And maybe it doesn't really matter because you're just pointing out she doesn't remember anything at all that has to do with her own activity, but like she can remember in detail, oh yeah, Ioan turned down the audition for this movie on this, this production and stuff like that. But her own career, she's remarkably forgetful about. I don't know. Really don't know. We turn to her testimony that she had spent a couple of years doing the IVF and reestablishing. She had turned down work then. Alice is now playing confused. Joe asked her about turning down opportunities, and I don't know what that means. What do you mean opportunities? I didn't turn down offers, so I don't know what you mean by opportunities. And Joe's like, when your attorney asked you about this, that was the word that she used, and you didn't have any trouble answering it then. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And Joe said, well, okay, so I understand that IVF was making things difficult, to be able to like continue work and stuff like that. So your attorney used the word opportunities. When she asked you that question, what did she mean? What did you understand it to mean? And so Alice said, I understood that to mean tapes and meetings and stuff like that. She says, I would have said that it wasn't a good idea to meet because they would want her in Albuquerque or wherever. and she would need to be there in Los Angeles. So no point in like wasting the time of the directors and producers because she wouldn't be able to leave Los Angeles. Once again, of course, she doesn't remember the names of any of those. The judge wants to know an estimate, the best estimate she can give of the number of opportunities that she turned down. And she says it's probably about 10 or so. Joe follows up to want to know, well, what's that based on? What's your estimate based on? And Alice is like kind of deer in headlights, not quite sure how to answer. And so she turns to the judge and she asks, can I explain? And she's, just, you need to just answer the question. What's the basis for your estimate? And Alice is like, well, I can't answer the question if I'm not allowed to explain. So the judge kind of cuts in and says, if we take both the 6-month period of IVF that you had for the first child and the second 2 years for the second, we know some work was offered and it was turned down because of needing to be within 400, I think she said 400 miles of Los Angeles. And so combined between those, about how many did you turn down? And so she thinks combined, she's doing the whole like big dramatic face expression thing again. Counting on her fingers, probably maybe about 15 turned down. When she was having IVF the second time, she says the auditions were all in Los Angeles. And the judge clarifies, and so the jobs were turned down because the jobs were outside of Los Angeles. The auditions might have been in LA, but the jobs would have been outside LA. And Joe clarifies, but the auditions were in LA. And you can't say what the project start dates were. You could have auditioned, and he says, maybe in theory you could have auditioned and then, given a job not until after the baby was born. Well, there's an objection to this, and that is sustained. It's kind of speculative and it's also kind of argumentative. Make the argument if you think that her turning down work was unrealistic or not well reasoned. That's an argument to make, not necessarily something to argue with her about. So Joe returns to the basis for her estimate of you said 10 jobs in that 2-year period. What's the basis for that? And so Alice kind of hums and haws and basically gets to it. Well, in 30 years, I did over 1,000 auditions. And so I'm trying not to misstate, right? It's very important because I'm under oath that I not misstate. She's said this multiple times now from yesterday. And then, the day before, it's obviously not yesterday in real time, but the previous day of testimony and then continuing into her cross-examination. This has been a common theme. I'm under oath, so I want to be very careful not to misstate. And it's kind of funny in terms of how this develops pretty quickly. But so I'm trying not to misstate. I'm just, trying to estimate and, what the time period would have been. But she doesn't have any specific recall of any specific job. And then Alice says, well, I feel like I was asked to give a number. And so I did, but now I'm being asked to specify. And, she thinks it's very unfair, this questioning. But we just establish there's no recollection of any specific job that she has turned down. And her basis for this is just she's done lots of auditions over the years. And so she's kind of trying to calculate the time. The judge is interjecting during this questioning. And he doesn't, it's quite clear he doesn't like kind of how Joe is doing this questioning. He's interjecting to kind of clarify the question or take over the question, or also to clarify, to like state Alice's answer, what she said to Joe. So it's just not real boding well in terms of like Joe and the judge kind of being on the same eye-to-eye page about how we're going about eliciting information in this trial. At this point in the questioning, now we're back like we were the day before, with the jacket is now off and we're sitting up there in that manky tank. back on the stand. A lot of the morning, she bravely faces the testimony with just the manky tank and not the emotional support scarf. So perhaps she's getting a little bit more comfortable with this role of witness. Some questions she had been asked in her direct about reading the premarital agreement. Did she not read it before signing it? There's an objection to this that is sustained on the basis that it restates her testimony. Joe is now getting frustrated because, he's getting objected to, it's getting sustained. The judge is getting involved in his questioning and kind of running a little bit of interference. And so he says, I'm just trying to get to the truth here, Your Honor. And the judge didn't like this at all. The judge gives him a long look down from the bench. Long look down from the bench. Just trying to get to the truth here. So he asks, is it true you did not read the premarital agreement before signing? It's once again like the same question. This one they didn't object to me. They didn't object to. And she says, it's true that I didn't read the papers that were put in front of me at the office. When she went to the office, she didn't read the papers that were put in front of her. And Joe clarifies, and those papers were in fact the premarital agreement. And she said, yes. So then we turn to the premarital agreement. We read sections 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. We looked at this yesterday, and we were looking at these documents. I didn't think to have them pulled up today, so maybe I will do that real quick because, like I said, this premarital agreement has been filed with like every single document. So I don't think it should be too hard to go in and find it. Let me find it real quick and then we can take a look. I'm sure it is with, it's with Alice's RFO. Okay, here it is. So here are, I'm going to share. All right. Can we see that? Yes, it's nice and big. Here are the sections that he asked her to read to herself. 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. Okay, she read them to herself. Also points out she initialed every single page of the premarital agreement. Yes. Yes, she did. Yes, indeed, she did. We then go to, let me bring it back up real quick. We then go to page 41 of the premarital agreement. Page 41. It's going to be a ways down here. Page 41 are the attorney certifications. He has her read those. And so these are the certifications that, I'm this person's lawyer. I've advised you about this document. We've talked about it. She's acknowledged her understanding of it. She's freely and voluntarily executed it. This is the job of the lawyer to make sure you have no questions about this thing before you sign it. And so they have literally certified to that as part of the document itself. So we've established now Alice is reminded of that, but she's not asked any other questions about that. Just pointed out to her attention. She agrees that they were married about 4 to 5 months after signing the premarital agreement. Janina objects at this point to relevance. The premarital agreement is valid. We know, Janina, we know that you stipulated to that, while at the same time you're trying to have it both ways by saying it's valid, but nobody knows what it means. But apparently only Ellis gets to testify on direct about what she thought it means and whether she understood it and so forth. I don't know. Judge overrules this one. So she clarifies that they were married on August 2nd of 2007. And between the time of the signing the prenup and, in that 4 to 5 months until they were married, did she say anything to Ioan about any ambiguity in the premarital agreement? No, she did not. And did she make any effort to clarify any ambiguity about the terms of the premarital agreement? No, she did not. And during that time period, she didn't read it then either, according to her, is her testimony. Does she understand? Alice, do you understand that people are required to read documents before you sign them, when you sign contracts? This is objected to as argumentative and calling for a legal conclusion. It's sustained. Joe says, he gives a proffer. I want to, the proffer is that she did understand it, Judge. And the judge says, it doesn't matter because the law presumes that she did. The law presumes that if you sign something, you read it and understood it, or you wouldn't have signed it. At this point, Joe has no further questions. This is the end of cross. I was not pleased. I wasn't pleased. It's just, what were some of the things she gave us just in that testimony from the day before that I had notes, I had the little stars in my margin about things to talk to her about. Oh, a real big one. Those gifts, all that help you got from the family and friends back when you put out the SOS notice and got gifts and loans and so forth that she couldn't ever specify, couldn't ever identify, who they were or anything like that. Zero follow-up on any of that. Zero follow-up on taxes. Zero follow-up on Gloria. Did you 1099 Gloria? Did you W-2 Gloria? Where's any kind of documentation of where's your gift return for Gloria? Is that a loan from Gloria? No follow-up on any of that. The Facebook fundraiser that she got to go to her brother's funeral after we learned that her brother's mother-in-law wired her $3,000 to be able to go to the funeral, at the same time that there's this fundraiser put up on Facebook by the Christmas card group, the people that love the movie The Christmas Card. They put together a fundraiser to, pay for her plane tickets and things like that to go to the funeral. Whatever happened with that? Whatever happened with that? No real follow-up on Alice's claim that her, after the marriage is when her career kind of started to fizzle. This is a great opportunity to just sort of go through her IMDb and point out you were getting more and better roles after you were married than you did before. No follow-up on this health condition and her sandbagging about the health condition at her deposition. Yeah, I'm just flipping back through some of these things. No follow-up on the non-disclosure. No follow-up on the mystery accounts, the mystery deposits. None of this. That was it for cross. I wasn't happy with this. I really wasn't. Just so much left on the table. Nothing about, all of the claims, the eviction fraud, how she set up the eviction. Nothing about the statements she was making on social media, and the GoFundMe. I have no money. The things that they had already set up in Ioan's declaration. you said this publicly on this day. And as it turns out, when you said I have $20 in the bank, you actually had $50, $50,000 in the bank. I don't remember the exact numbers. It's there in the filing. Like they literally already did this work. Not a single damn question about any of that. I was not happy. I really was not happy with this being the end of Cross. So at this point, the judge had a whole bunch of questions. He says, I want to ask questions about an area that is relevant that I don't feel like we got into at all, that nobody got into. And his question is, Alice, do you have some plan for what you are going to do, job-wise, career-wise? What's your plan? Great question, because this is a really important factor that goes into the spousal support calculation. If we're not going to use the prenup, if we're going to apply the factors and, calculate support and so forth that way, then, her ability to move on and become self-sustaining and her, plans and intentions and steps she's taken to do that are really, really important. And nobody asked her anything about that. So it's kind of another big area that has just been left untouched because of all of the time that she has had since this divorce. Remember the big financial catastrophe in November of 2023? She was in a catastrophic financial condition. I realized I had my timeline wrong as far as when she actually got evicted. So it wasn't right. She wasn't even facing, she was like still perfectly fine paying her $6,500 a month for another year after she was having the catastrophic financial situation. So we don't know what that even means. And so 3 years ago, according to Alice, 2.5 years ago, she had a catastrophic financial condition. What the fuck did you do to take care of it? What did you do to fix it then? What did you do to fix it then? Why didn't you have a plan then? Why didn't you start carrying out this plan then? None of this has been explored until the judge decides, this is important and we need to bring it up. I have a solo cat in here with me today who is getting a little into things. My big boy Judy, look how big he is. Look how big just Jude has gotten. Look at that big boy. Hey bud. That's sweetie. He's probably not going to want to sit and cuddle with me, but we'll give it a shot. So anyway, the judge is finally going to bring this up about what's your plan? What's your plan to become self-sustaining? You got this Gavron warning 1.5 years ago. What have you done? She says she has lots of ideas and leads. She particularly is interested in pursuing writing. She also says there are some gigs in TV hosting that she might be able to do, that there's been some interest in. She says she might be able to do some here domestically, but most people who want to employ her are in London. Writing, however, is something that she wants to pursue. So she has been also hustling with the conventions, and that's a big part of her plan because those build on fan excitement, and those require a lot of self-promotion and things like that. But she's like, those will kind of build and lead to new invites, and you never really know if you might, get a role, get renewed interest from producers and things like that based on the fan interest. Also, she may need to reach out to her agent about the misunderstanding that they've had, that she just learned about this message from back in 2001 and is pretending now that this has caused a misunderstanding throughout, the last 5 years that she's never addressed. But I may need to you might need to call your fucking agent, Alice. That might be a good idea if you want some work. Maybe call your agent. How's that? Alice said something that was just possibly, I might have snorted audibly in court when she said this. This was before I was like feeling This is before the food poisoning hit. Alice says, I'm a hustler. I'm a hustler. I'm somebody who really wants to work. How self-deluded do you have to be to think that you hustle? The fact that you haven't worked for like a decade is a pretty strong contradiction of this this self-image. It is completely, I'm sure she would like, it reminds me of in Gone with the Wind. It's a great book, great movie. But Gone with the Wind, there's a part where Scarlett O'Hara, shortly after she's been widowed from Charles Hamilton, and she's living in Atlanta, and it's during the war, and she and Melanie are doing the work at the hospital, caring for the wounded, and Melanie is just so good at it. You know, she's such an angel, and Scarlett hates it because it's not fun and it's hot and the men aren't cute and they don't really flirt with her and stuff. And there's this part in it about how what she really wants is the reputation for being the Florence Nightingale angel, the angel nurse, but she doesn't want to actually do the work to earn, that would entitle you to a reputation like that. That's what this made me think of. This is what you want people to think of you, but you are not, in fact, willing to do the work that is actually involved in hustling. Because what she does is she lies in bed on social media. And it's just wild how far out of grasp somebody can be with kind of their own character. She says, as far as writing goes, she has pitched a novel. She's pitched a novel to an agent, and so that's one potential avenue that she's looking at. She's pitched a novel. I actually kind of support Alice writing a novel if she would do that. Writing a novel kind of seems like a good outlet for her impulse to smear and do these nasty things and stuff like that. But if you do it in a novel, live out your revenge fantasies in fiction. Maybe don't go over the top, because that could still be a little bit alarming to the people who you have, abused. But it just does seem quite a bit more productive an avenue than the whole game with the Daily Mail and the social media stuff and calling the paparazzi and all that has been. As far as the TV gigs and the hosting, she clarifies that people, so far she hasn't been invited to host. She's mainly just been invited as a guest. She's been invited to talk about changing your life in your 50s. I don't know what kind of insight Alice is supposed to have about changing her life in her 50s, because she hasn't changed anything at all. She is continuing to hang on to the pre-divorce life as some kind of entitlement that she has, and is struggling to try to get that back when that's not ever going to happen. And the part where she takes the steps to like move beyond that and move forward with her own life have not yet happened 5 years on. So I'm interested in like what would be the impetus for this. Perhaps this would be people telling her, you need to change your life, time to move on. I don't really know. But she hasn't yet said yes to anything. The only thing she's been actually offered has been to come on as a guest. But it seems that she hasn't accepted that either. So she'd have to, her hope would be for that to lead into something else. She's not like, apparently, she says there's been interest in hosting, but it seems like the interest is exclusively hers. If nobody has offered anything to you but coming and sitting in a guest chair, then it seems that there's not a lot of interest there. She does say that Joe Vance is still her agent. He's still her agent. Okay, so whatever this fucking email back in 2021 said between Mary Ellen and Joe and Ioan that she's all freaked out about, oh my God, trying to get Joe to fire me. Apparently, Joe did not, in fact, fire her because he's still her agent 5 years later. So why that's such a thing to get outraged about? It's just so transparently opportunistic. It's not an issue. It did nothing. It's a no harm, no foul type of situation. But she's just absolutely got to cry about it and try to come up with a way in her mind about how, oh, that was a way that Ioan caused her major career problems, even though he said he was going to fire her. He didn't. So who the fuck cares what the email said? As her agent, he is purely a theatrical agent, meaning he looks for film and TV roles. She is looking for another agent in London, and there's one that hasn't taken her on yet, but is interested in her doing gigs. I don't think the agent is that interested if the agent hasn't taken you on. If the agent hasn't taken you on, the agent seems not very interested. But part of her plan is to get another film or TV agent in London. How she's going to do that when she's talking to the one who has interest but won't take her on. No real perspective on how that works in Alice World. She would also need a literary agent to do writing work. She says she is in contact with one, but they haven't signed anything. So yet again, this is kind of dreamland for Alice. It's something that might be possible, but nobody is willing to make her any kind of offer for anything. Give me half a sec, because I got to get this cat. I got to get this cat out of here. All right. He was just getting annoyed at being separated from everybody else and starting to tear up my door. So I'm all alone now. No cats for me. So all of these things she does. All of these things are kind of like still dreamland. What's the plan? Well, the plan is I want all of these things to happen, but these things are not happening. And so I can't help but notice this is not really a plan. This is just more of a, it's like more of a brainstorm. This is more of like a fantasy situation. She does have her conventions agent, Angelo, and he only does conventions. He specializes in that, puts some on himself, apparently. Asked if she is planning to potentially pursue any other avenues of work. She says no. Nope. Now, if somebody offered her something like as a one-off, a one-off gig, but, as far as would something, turning into being able to develop something bigger for the children's future, she wouldn't turn anything down. She wouldn't turn anything down. She's kind of all over. She's getting flustered through all this. This is very narrative. Because it's just talking back and forth with the judge, and she talks and she rambles as she's doing. So she's getting like dramatic and kind of like flustered and stops and pauses. And so the judge tells her, just slow down. Just slow down. Just answer. Just slow down. But this was quite an interesting. Like, the reason she's getting flustered is because you've set your answer up to put you in a possible situation. No, you're not planning anything else, but you would do anything for the children, and you would take a one-off. Like, I'm not seeing how any of this amounts to an actual plan to step up and provide financially for your children. This sounds like a plan to continue to sit back and hope that something is going to change, even though, like, just the day before and in these previous declarations and everything, she was pointing out, probably prudently, that given her age, it is hard to get roles now. And it is indeed quite hard for women to sustain a long career in film and television unless you have real good acting skills. You know, you put in the work to be an actor, and then you can develop into the, you know, the older roles, more sophisticated roles, and things like that. But if your job is eye candy, then yeah, you're going to hit the ceiling of your career pretty quickly. So her plan seems to be that somehow, despite the fact that she can't get roles because she's been out of the industry since 2016 was the last time she was on a set, and she's now 57 years old, nevertheless, somehow her plan is none of that's going to apply to me. Just bizarre. Just a bit bizarre. But she won't turn anything down, but she sure as hell won't go look for anything more concrete, will she? But basically a concession here that if nothing lands in her lap, if a film, TV, or possibly writing career doesn't get offered to her, she has no other plan. Doesn't intend to pursue anything else. She does now plan to still audition for film and TV because now that the youngest child is turning 13, she says it's now possible to leave them for a week or so. So now it's possible. Back when she had a freaking nanny, apparently it wasn't. You guys, you try to make sense of the logic for me. I can't get there. But she does need a professional representation to pursue any of these avenues. The judge then asks her, points out there's a difference in roles between a manager and an agent. Do you have a manager at this point? And she says no, she has no manager. Her manager had been Mary Ellen. She would like to find a new manager, and she starts going on the story about how, you know, because she's rambling about how, you know, sometimes managers work singly and sometimes they like to work jointly because it will increase their contacts and things like that. The judge cuts her off on this story. Doesn't give a fuck about what Alice being the expert now on managers and how managers work and so forth. It doesn't matter. But has she taken any steps to pursue that yet? Getting a new manager? No. No, she hasn't taken any steps to get a new manager. Mary Ellen dropped her 5 years ago. And she's had all that time. Hasn't done it. She'd like to, but you know, one hasn't fallen in her lap. That's our hustler Alice here. That's our hustler Alice and how badly she wants to work. 5 years, and she has not gotten a new manager. Besides these plans, reiterated, no other plans. No other plans for work besides writing, TV, film. That's her plan. So the judge now turns to her education. What is her degree in? She does have a bachelor's degree. She says it's in French and Italian, and she is fluent in French and Italian. Asked if she's fluent in French and Italian, she answers, I'm not fluent in Spanish. I can speak it persuasively, but not as with the, you know, felicity of the French and Italian. Nobody asked you about fucking Spanish. It's about French and Italian. Has she considered avenues relating to her foreign language capabilities? And she says, yes. Well, she's considered them. But, you know, there's going to be a gazillion roadblocks for why that isn't going to work. So first, translation is dead because of the apps, Google Translate and stuff like that. Yes and no, you know, yes and no. The issue that I find with the translation is that there's still like if you're actually good at these languages, maybe it's less so with French and Italian, although there's definitely big regional differences from like, Quebecois and French. And I imagine in like some of the colonial areas, former colonial areas and stuff like that, probably some differences. But what got me thinking about this in particular was with Spanish. Spanish has like so many different, you got your formal Castilian Spanish from Spain. You have all of these like variants, and they all have their own kind of slang and different ways of saying things and different ways of pronouncing things and all this stuff. Mexican is very different from Spanish, is very different from, what they speak in Venezuela is very different from what they speak in Chile, and the slang is all different. And one of the things you learn very quickly in Chile is that Mexican slang does not translate. It doesn't translate. Don't try to use one country's slang in another. So as far as like the apps kind of killing translation, I think that might be somewhat true, but there's still a lot of ways in which the apps don't capture. They don't capture like regional differences. They don't capture slang well. They don't. They're still not to the point where they're really a substitute for a human being with a knowledge of this language sitting down and translating something like Pablo Neruda in a way that's, true to the language, but also going to capture the meaning and the poetry and stuff like that. Very much a skill to translation that, the apps can help you function in like you're in a foreign country and you need to read the menu. Chances are pretty good. Although food is one of the hard things to translate because a lot of times like food items, they don't have a translation. It's just a thing. Like pretty sure. Let me do a test real quick. Just going to grab my phone real quick and try something. I'm going to look up in Google Translate, like say you're at a restaurant. You're at a restaurant and you're like, I'm really hungry. And here's what we have on the menu. We have pupusas on the menu. I'm interested in that. What's a pupusa? You put it in Google Translate and what do you get? I can't see it. You get pupusa. So I noticed this a lot when I was in Chile. You'd like try to look up food. There's no translation for it. And there's no like explanation about what this thing is. So you either know what a pupusa is and whether you want to order it or you don't. Anyway, that's just my little aside about the apps and translation and so forth. The apps are very helpful, but as far as supplanting conventional translation, I don't think we're anywhere near that point yet. She says back in the day, she wanted to be an interpreter. But that's a whole other thing, which it is. Interpretation, live interpretation in particular, is quite difficult. And that's something that the court is going to be very familiar with. See, the court's going to be very familiar with live interpretation because you deal with that all the time, particularly in a court like Los Angeles. In Stanley Mosque, they have signs everywhere in like 4 or 5 different languages. Obviously Spanish is big, but they have Vietnamese, they have Korean, they have, I can't remember any others off the top of my head. I think like maybe Armenian. They have little Armenia there in Los Angeles. They got a big need for interpreters, and courts have to provide interpreters for people who are appearing before them that don't speak English. And it is definitely a skill because you got to be listening in one ear and you got to be able to hear what somebody is saying and then speak at the same time, translating what the person is saying, and you have to be accurate. There are very strict accuracy requirements in court translation, and it gets complicated sometimes because they have to stick to the letter of the language. But people will speak colloquially. They will use idioms. They will use, slang and stuff like that. And the interpreter might know what they mean, but you're not supposed to say what they mean. You're supposed to say literally what they say. So anyway, it is a whole other thing, interpreting. She says the realistic option for use of language is teaching, but she has not pursued any opportunities there. Perhaps because of the economy. Perhaps because of the economy, people looking for tutors is way down. How the fuck would she know? She just said she hasn't pursued any of this. People looking for tutors are down. Are you an economic expert now too? Have you gone and studied the foreign language? Like, what the fuck even is that? People looking for tutors is way down. How would you even know? How would you even know? She's not looking for any other opportunities. Gotten any calls for auditions in the last 6 months? No. The last audition she did was in August or September. Has she talked with her agent, with Mr. Vance? No. See, she's nervous to talk to him now because of what she learned about him taking her off the list, right? Taking her off the list for roles. She just learned this 3 weeks ago, and she's trying to use this as an excuse for why in the last 6 months or whatever, you haven't talked to your agent. This is not how time works, Alice. Before you learned that, it didn't prevent you from doing anything. So if your agent wasn't getting you auditions, why the fuck didn't you call him way back then? See, things have to be handed to her. Things have to land in her lap, and they also have to be exactly what she wants. They have to be suitable based on her high standards. She does not have an agent in London at the moment. And that was all of the questions that the judge had. So Janina now has Alice on redirect. And Janina immediately follows up on the judge's questioning. So we talk about her initial dream was to be an interpreter. But there is some additional education or training that is required. So Janina is jumping into this because that's another one of the factors that is considered in a spousal support award is, do you need money basically to get a certification or training or something like that so that you can be self-sufficient? So is there any additional education or training required? And Alice says, yes, there's a 3-year course that you do. She actually started it back in 1991. And you can just say you haven't looked into any of this because whatever you did in 1991, probably like what even are you talking about? Are you talking about being a court interpreter? Are you talking about being something more casual? Really not clear. But whatever, there's a 3-year course, apparently, according to Alice, that you take to be an interpreter. And that she started it back in 1991. And it was a very intensive course where you have these headphones on and you interpret. And it turns out that it's awful. Interpretation is awful. It's just not what she expected it to be, because you have to listen and you have to talk at the same time. And she wasn't as good at it as she would have liked. So she did a few days in 1991 in the course. And this was at the University College of London. She didn't get any grades, but it didn't go well, and they weren't sorry to see her go. And the reason they weren't sorry to see her go is because, when you're not good at interpreting, it's pretty obvious. And she was a disaster because on-the-go translation is not for me. This is Alice in a nutshell, isn't it? She tried for 3 days, wasn't immediately like really good at it. And rather than working to be better, just decided, not me, moving on, can't do it. I don't want to understate, again, it is difficult to get the certification to be an interpreter, and it is a difficult skill, but lots of people do it. Lots of people manage to pull it off and learn how it works. But that was that. She gave it a few days and then dropped out. As far as teaching, being able to teach foreign languages, is any additional education required for that? Alice says you can get it, if you have a bachelor's, you can kind of turn it into an education degree in a year. But I turned 58 this year, and that's already the early retirement age for teachers. Does that mean that you have to retire at 58? I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Pretty sure nothing would stop you from pursuing this avenue. But it's early retirement age is her reason why she can't pursue this avenue. She's also not sure that schools would hire her with a DVRO. That's a legitimate concern. Indeed, it is, Alice. You maybe should have thought about that before you engaged in your abuse campaign. But all of this is, of course, formal teaching. This is teaching in a school or in a university, and there are tons of ways to teach foreign language informally. Just like I'm thinking about something like piano teachers. Piano teachers routinely. You work out of your house. You have your students. Probably the minority of people who take piano lessons are doing it through a school or a university, But as far as the training that's required to be a teacher, she didn't look into it. She didn't look into it. I guess that 58 early retirement age is a huge impediment to teaching. Not so much for acting, even though it's a huge problem for getting roles, but not for Alice. Consistency is not something that holds her back from saying stuff. When accounting for the current support orders and the income that she receives, would she even have any funds to be able to pay for education? She doubts it. See, that's one more reason why she needs maintenance, is to get this education that, Janina, you didn't go over this. You didn't plan this in advance with your client because she just told you, no, this is pointless because I can't interpret and I'm too old to teach. So had you gotten on the same page, this might have been a selling point with the judge. You can't terminate spousal because I need an opportunity to get what I need to get a job outside of acting and become self-sufficient. She's already made a gazillion excuses for why those things aren't possible that have nothing to do with her ability to pay for training or not. Again, as far as her auditions, none in the last 6 months, the last one in August or September. Since January of 2025, okay, year and 3 months. How many has she done? 2. She's done 2. According to her, both at home. Both of these are video auditions. She hasn't turned any down, though. Hasn't turned any down. So that basically means, if that's true, of course, 1 in August and 1 before that, and nothing since. And of course, apparently no follow-up interest on either of those. We talked now about the amount of time that she spends on social media. Now, according to Alice, of course, her presence on social media, it impacts her employability in everything that's fan-based. And so that's specifically her cameos and her conventions. And so this is what necessitates all the time she spends on social media. She has to interact with fans. She tries to answer messages. She encourages them to do things like call convention organizers and ask for her. She says that 4 of the conventions she did in Europe in the last 18 months, she believes she got them because of fan requests. The compensation that she gets for convention work, she gets all of her flights and hotels paid. She gets a guarantee. The agent negotiates the guarantee with the convention organizer, and the amount of it varies. And what it means is that she gets a percentage of all of the ticket sales, the photos, the meet and greets, the things like that that are sold. They negotiate a percentage of all of that, but she also gets, the guarantee in case the sales don't reach that point. So she says this, some of these I would love to see the transcript because I'm like, I don't understand what she said. And I tried to write it down, but I don't, she says, sometimes say the guarantee is $9,000. Sometimes it happens. Or maybe sometimes she comes away with 4,000 or 5,000. I'm not really sure what she was trying to say with that, but I don't know. Bottom line, there's a guarantee, like guaranteed minimum, but otherwise it's a percentage of the take. We go back to her income and expense declaration from November of 2022, the first one that she filed, the one that we haven't seen before. So first, the amount on 11A is that was we looked at these yesterday, or the day before. These income and expense declarations. 11A is the total assets, the total asset amount. So we look at that first, and this had come up when Joe was questioning her because it doesn't seem to include the CHOR balance. And so when the judge says, like, there's this amount, and then Janina is asking, did you file this document as a standalone document? And it's Alice is confused. They're confused, and the judge is like, what is this? And Janina says, well, I just want to be sure you're aware of another exhibit 47, which I think is her declaration of her statement of assets and debts. The other one that they lodge and don't file, so we don't get to see that. But the judge says it's in evidence. I don't necessarily expect, Alice to know what is in all of these different documents and how they get filed and so forth. He says, sometimes there's a declaration of disclosure. Sometimes it's filed all the same. Sometimes the income and expense is standalone. It just depends. And that's a thing that he's familiar with and the family lawyers are familiar with, but he doesn't expect Alice to be familiar with. So ultimately asked, were you intentionally trying to conceal the CHOR balance? Oh, no. Oh, no. Of course she's not. Of course she's not. Why does it say $12,000 on line 11A then? When she had the CHOR balance, it isn't included. Well, of course, it's a clerical error. It's a clerical error. It's somebody else's fault. The CHOR amount is listed in the other documents that she submitted. So whoever wrote that down on this line just made a clerical error, and she of course made the error in signing it, but we don't touch on that. Then revisiting her deposition testimony about her medical condition, she says she did respond to questions about her medical condition, which I don't think is the answer that Janina was looking for. Janina asked her, did you respond? And we heard when the portion of the deposition was read the other day that she was instructed by Janina not to answer those questions. And so that's why she didn't. But she says, yes, she did respond to questions. She didn't. Sitting here today, does she have a medical condition that prevents her ability to work? Joe objects to this at this point. He says, I was prevented from going into this in the deposition. And the judge says, well, but now it's trial. Now it's trial. So that's overruled. Here's what I'm kind of seeing procedurally. That's potentially, like, this is not the first time where there is an issue that could have and perhaps should have been raised, and there are avenues and expectations for how to correct these types of problems that were not taken. And instead, it's now kind of being brought up at trial. This is the same thing as the other day when Joe said, I'm objecting to this exhibit because of the late production, the late exchange of exhibits. There was a court order that had deadlines certain to exchange exhibits. They weren't met. And the judge says, we had 3 weeks of trial and then, another 3 weeks. And here you are raising it now. It's too late. You have waived that objection. I think the judge is having quite a similar attitude about this particular objection, because the deposition was in December of 2024 and January of 2025. These were over a year ago. And there are avenues to approach if somebody is not complying with the rules and requirements for a deposition. You go to court and you move to compel. You go to court and you move for a finding of contempt. You do something so that you can bring it to the court's attention, get a ruling on whether this question needs to be answered or not, or you file a motion in limine before trial and say that given that she's never she refused to answer during the deposition, she should be precluded from being able to assert now that she's got some kind of disability, when she wasn't willing to provide that before, on the grounds that since she's not claiming that she's got a disability that keeps her from working, she shouldn't get to have her cake and eat it too. So lots of ways they could have addressed this and handled it at the time, but they didn't. And this has been like it's just been yet another ongoing thing. Like if there's no compliance with production, you move to compel. If there's an issue with not complying with court orders, you move for contempt. And they haven't done that a single time. Joe didn't do that a single freaking time. There's not a single request for a finding of contempt in any of this, even though there's been ample reasons to and ample opportunities to. Like the most glaring one that jumps out in my mind was back when Alice was moving to Beverly Hills right after they sold the home. And there's a court order that says she's not supposed to change Elsie's school from her West Hollywood school without Ioan's permission or order of the court. And she did it anyway. She changed the school anyway, without either of those things. That's contempt of a court order, but they did nothing to enforce it. And so I'm starting to feel like Joe's approach has been very passive. It's been very passive because he's not stepping up to assert these things at the time when you could still potentially fix it. He's not helping himself get the information that he wants. And then we get to trial and he complains that he doesn't have it, but the judge is like, you didn't help yourself to get to this. So I had some sympathy with him on this one because, she did. And this seems like such a clear double standard. Janina instructed her not to answer because she's not claiming a disability that prevents her from being able to work. So it's privileged. So she doesn't answer. And now you go to trial and your position has changed. But Joe didn't do anything to address that. And so now here we are. Yes, she does. She does have a medical condition, and she certainly hope she's got a autoimmune condition, and she certainly hope it doesn't affect her ability to work. She had a flare recently that was brought on by her brother's funeral in October, but other than that, she hasn't had any flares in the last 3 years, and so she's hopeful that she's gotten on top of that condition won't affect her ability to work. Then the most recent income and expense declaration, we look at the section that identifies debts and asked if we confirmed she had testified they had perhaps changed a little bit. Some have been paid off. Some might have a slightly larger balance. But does she have other debts that are not reflected there? No. So she does not apparently have loans to family or friends, despite having previously attributed some of these mystery deposits in her declarations filed in court to loans that she got from family and friends. Regarding signing the premarital agreement. Now, Ioan didn't say anything about ambiguities in that period during the premarital agreement and the marriage. He didn't say anything about them. Yeah, because he doesn't think it's fucking ambiguous. This question was like, this is a strategy. This is a strategy that Janina clearly has to, blame shift and him too, and try to like drag him down into the mud with her. Oh, well, Alice didn't ask for clarification, but neither did Ioan. Yeah, because Ioan didn't need any fucking clarification because this thing is not actually ambiguous. He read it and understood it. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's why he didn't bring it up. Did Ioan make statements to her about the premarital agreement. Joe objects to this. This is overruled. And she says that he used to joke that she walked all over him in those meetings and she got the best prenup and stuff like that. But he didn't make any statements about earning appreciation on the La Jolla property. Why would he need to? It says it in the prenup, which your lawyer certified that she explained to you, and you are presumed to have read. They both received residuals at the time of the premarital agreement. Alice testifies that between the time of the signing to the point of the marriage, they had a joint account, and residuals were deposited in that joint account. Like she's, I think, saying hers were, because she says she doesn't know where Ioan's were being deposited. Angelo, her conventions agent. How often do they talk? They talk every day. Oh God, poor Angelo. Poor Angelo. They talk every day, and she's got what, one scheduled this year? One. She's been to one. She's scheduled for one. They talk every day. Poor guy. What else, Alice, do you do to try to earn income? Well, she tries to generate fan interest through her social media activity. Angelo and her go back and forth all day. Normally, she would be in touch with Joe about 3 times a week or so, but now it makes sense why I haven't heard from him. Why the fuck haven't you called him 3 times a week? When was the last time you talked with Joe 3 times a week? Find that one a little hard to believe, but now it makes sense why I haven't heard from him. Because of an email back in 2021 that had no effect whatsoever, because he's continued to bring you auditions up until last September, last August. No, the reason why you haven't heard from him is because nobody wants you. Nobody wants you as an actress. He's got nothing. That's why you haven't heard from him. Perhaps if you called him, you could verify that. Opportunities. We now talk about the opportunities that she did not take after the date of separation. Now, at this point in time, she did have childcare, right? She had Gloria. Janina's getting out ahead of this because Joe never went into any of this, but Janina's getting out ahead of it. Yeah, she had Gloria. So why not take roles outside of LA when Gloria was still the nanny? Well, number one, up until very recently, I didn't believe it was the right thing for a mother to leave kids for a week or so when that's the only parent in their life. How self-serving. Perhaps if you didn't alienate the children from the father so that he could take care of them while you work, then that might have been an option. But just her belief, it's not right. It's not right to do that, is why she didn't. It's a vanity position. And then second, because Gloria was a 9-to-5 nanny, so I'd have to be paying her overtime for all of the extra hours and the overnight, and believe it would be cost prohibitive. I'm skeptical. I don't know how much Alice is commanding as an actress these days. I mean, I don't know how much she ever commanded, even in her prime. But I'm just quite skeptical. When Gloria worked for her, she did take work that required travel outside of LA. And that specifically was a convention, the convention she did in August of 2023 in Conyers, Georgia. For that one, she was there for 4 days and nights, and Gloria stayed with the kids, and she charged $2,400 for 4 days and 4 nights. Okay, Alice, so as long as you made more than $2,400 during that convention, then you're still coming out ahead. And well, as we find out, Alice made $12,000 on that convention. 10-8 after the commission to the agent. So Alice makes 10.8, pays Gloria 2,400. That means she's like 7,500 or so still ahead. So this is not the cost prohibitive that I see. We go now to cross and redirect. So Joe gets another chance. And at this point, she does not know what her residuals were at the date of the marriage, but she does acknowledge that her residuals were being deposited, her foreign residuals were being deposited to the C-Whore account. So whatever, this testimony about the joint account, and I deposited my residuals there, but we already know, because you already said your foreign residuals went to the C-Whore account. And that makes sense because this is all consistent with the pre-marriage stuff going to the separate source. Ioan used the Derwent-Deg Loan Out Corporation. She used the C-Whore account. And then it was the post-marriage stuff that would go into the community sources. We have a very, very long pause, like waiting for questions. And remember, I mentioned yesterday, I noticed for the first time, Ioan has this journal that he's been holding in his lap and he's been writing in. And so I've seen him several times throughout the course of the trial, just kind of sitting with his head down, thinking, God, he looks like such a defeated man. He's in that pose again while we're just sort of waiting for Joe to ask questions. But he doesn't have the journal in his lap. So I guess it's all a little both. I mean, we are waiting. Tick tock. What are you going to ask about, Joe? The conventions. Okay. We're going to talk about the conventions again. So she has been attending conventions now for almost 3 years. And they are based on what roles? Based on her role as Esther Michelson in the Vampire Diaries and the originals. And also, she says the Christmas card also sells very well. There's the 3 episodes of Lost she did that sell well. And she still will also sometimes sell the 102 Dalmatians. When she says they sell well, what I think she means is like you sell a photo, from something like that. But so Joe clarifies that as far as the conventions, she's offered them because of her Vampire Diaries role. And the Vampire Diaries filmed first in 2011 and 2012, and then second in 2015 to 2016. And Joe points out 2011, 2012. That's during the period when you were on your IVF, wasn't it? And where did that film? It filmed in Atlanta. We just heard from Alice how she spent 2 years out of the workforce because she couldn't possibly leave LA because of the timing. She had to be there. But she filmed her biggest freaking role out of LA during this time when she said, I couldn't do anything outside of LA. I just don't understand this thinking. How do you hold these things in your mind at the same time? It's so difficult for me to relate to the mind of a narcissist and that epistemic plasticity that they have. Truth is just variable to the moment. When she said that before, see, it was based on the need of the moment, which was to make it look like she had sacrificed everything for this marriage, and that's why she needs all of this maintenance. But now the need is not getting impeached as a big fat liar in front of the judge. I mean, except that you are. Like, this is going to come out. How do you not know? He's got like your whole records, and your IMDb is right there. He's going to be able to point out, you said you couldn't work out of LA for 2 months. Please explain this working outside of LA, not 2 months, 2 years. Please explain when you were doing that at this point in time. The guarantees that she gets for the conventions, every one of those is different. The biggest one she ever got was $12,000. The last one, she thought she had a three $3,500 guarantee, and she thinks she made 2,000. I think she means 2,000 on top of that. So we're still, right? We're still $5,500, and you have to pay $550 to your agent as his commission. We figured this out, 10% commission. So $5,000. If she had to pay Gloria $2,400, she's still coming out ahead. We're still not like cost prohibitive with the math. Last year, and these are just conventions. Like, I have to think you make more acting than you do going to conventions. I have to think that, but I don't know. I mean, of course, you're not making anything at all if you're not getting acting gigs, which is really the bottom line problem that she has. For the last year on conventions combined, how much did she make? And she doesn't know. I have to look at the paperwork. Can't give an estimate. Joe asked, what would you need to look at to be able to make an estimate? I would need to look at my texts with Angelo, not her bank statements, not her, checks, not her, her texts with Angelo is what she'd need to be able to estimate how much she made. And unlike what Wayne Mejia used to do, the financial manager and stuff like that, Angelo doesn't provide her with regular reports, that tell her income or anything like that. Last year, how many conventions did she do? Guesstimate. Get with the dramatic, finger counting, 4 or 5, maybe. We work through Georgia, Covington, Paris, and Atlanta. These were all in connection with her roles in the Vampire Diaries. Doesn't remember what she earned from the Paris conventions. She remembers she went to Paris in February and October of last year, and then to Georgia in November, and a second time that she's just not sure when. Doesn't know how much she earned in 2021, but she would have had those funds wired into her C&B account. This is all Joe needs to be able to make whatever argument he wants to make about how the conventions are not lucrative. The conventions aren't, satisfying the Gavron requirement to become self-sustaining, because he'll be able, with that concession, to point to the wires in her bank account and say, here's the proof of it. Maybe she doesn't remember, but here they are. For 2024, the conventions, she doesn't remember where they were. She'd need to check. She doesn't know how many they were. In 2023, she did the one, and that was in August in Georgia. That was the one. She earned $12,000, but netted $10,800 with the agent commission. And she had to pay Gloria $2,400, so therefore it was cost prohibitive. She walked out of there with, over almost $7,500, and that's cost prohibitive, I guess. The 2024 conventions were all out of town. So this whole, I can't work out of town. Every one of her conventions has been out of town. In 2024, she's not sure if any were in Europe. Maybe the first Paris one was late 2024. But since I'm under oath, I'd really like to check. Yeah, like you really wanted to check your whole timeline of the IVF and your whole story about the 2 years you couldn't work. Yeah, we can definitely see how precise you're concerned about being with your testimony. Again, with the disconnect between the self-image and the self-pitch and the reality that we can all see for ourselves from having sat through this process. The total foreign conventions she's done in the last 3 years, there have been 4. 3 of them were in Paris. 1 is in London. How long was she gone for these? Days. And now she's again doing the dramatic, the finger counting and the faces and we did this. And she's starting to think out loud and, to because we did this and then, but this other time. And so Joe stops her and cuts all this off. And just clarify the first Paris trip. How many days were you gone? She was the first one. She was gone for 5 days. And on that one, she took the children at the last minute because of the fires. The second one, she went without the kids. And she was also, again, gone for 5 days and 4 nights. The third one, she says, I went to a funeral in London and then to the convention. And she was gone for 3 days, but the total time there that she was in Europe was 11. And the kids went with her. And Alice is crying now at this point because she seems to be talking about going to Tony's funeral. So this seems to be her saying that they were gone. The kids went with her. They were gone a total of 11 days. 3 of those are spent on the convention. So this is the closest we've gotten to Alice testifying that she went to her brother's funeral. She does seem to say that she did and took the kids with her. She cries and then has to, I'm okay. I'm okay. Clarifying on the fires in Los Angeles, Joe Claire, are we talking about the Palisades fire? Just to be clear, all the fires. Okay, so the Palisades and the other fires, yes, this is what we're talking about. And Joe said, and these were in January of 2024, and the judge corrects him, they were in January of 2025. So this particular convention, if she took the kids at the last minute because of the fires, that was in January 2025. I was interested in that. There was no, I might have followed up. You took them because of the fires. So had the fires not happened, your plan was to go alone and the children would stay in Los Angeles, just to be real clear. And so when you traveled for these conventions 5 or 6 times when you left Los Angeles, what did you do with the kids? Well, the first time Gloria stayed. The subsequent times I had to leave them on their own. She had to leave them on their own. So she leaves her kids in LA by themselves while she goes to work. This started, 2 years ago, 2024. Ella's 14. Elsie is 10. Is that where we're at age-wise? I don't necessarily, 14 is maybe a little young to be left alone while your mother is traveling internationally. Might be a little bit much. Less concerned about it now, I guess, but it really does depend on the kids, doesn't it? And the just maturity and functionality of the kids. And part of the concern I have about that is the stunting that Alice's parenting seems to be encouraging. But yeah, so she's fine, has been fine for 2 years, leaving the kids to go to these conventions outside of Los Angeles, but still maintaining this can't film outside of LA, won't leave them to go film, probably earn more money. The logic is so incoherent and so tangled. It's a real mess. She's asked about the GoFundMe, the funds that she got from GoFundMe. She's received some support through GoFundMe, yes, and she started it in June of 2022. At this point, Janina objects that the GoFundMe is beyond the scope for redirect, and that's sustained. It is beyond the scope, Joe. You needed to ask her about the fucking GoFundMe in your cross-examination. That's what cross-examination is for. I'm so baffled. I'm just so baffled at this strategy that why are you even bringing it up now? Did you forget? If you forgot, that's fine. It's just that this is like a problem. That's a big thing to forget. You want to go into it now on your recross when it didn't come up on redirect. No, you're not going to be allowed to do that. Your chance to do this was on cross, and he didn't do it on cross. No further questions at this point. Well, he got a little bit more. He got a little bit more juice out of this recross. I think the whole, yeah, we're working. during that 2 years when you said you couldn't work. I thought that was really, as obviously a very good point, but it was just particularly good in the context of all of these repeated, insistences by Alice that she's got to be very, very careful about how she answers questions because she's under oath and she needs to be precise and doesn't want to misstate anything, when she didn't take any of that care in her direct examination to make sure that the judge understood that when she said she was out of the workforce for 2 years, she actually wasn't. She was, in fact, working. So that was good. Redirect now from Janina. The travel for the conventions that she did when she was going internationally, she usually stays 5 days and 4 nights. The U.S. conventions, you save a day on travel. So she says she is usually gone for 3 nights. Says sometimes she tries to fly back on Sunday late, but those flights get canceled. And so she often ends up coming back Monday morning. Skeptical of this as well. I mean, yes, I know flights get canceled from time to time, but not as like a regular thing. I think her reasons for staying until Monday are probably a little different. She confirms that her compensation for the conventions is deposited into her C&B account by wire, but that doesn't mean all of the wires into her account are compensation for conventions. So there's other wires in. We already know that. She already had to explain the one, oh, that was the gift from my mother-in-law or Tony's mother-in-law so that I could go to the funeral. How many other wires are there? Don't know, because none of this got asked and none of this got followed up on. But Janina clearly wants to make sure that, deposits into her account. That's part of their argument. Deposits into Alice's account don't necessarily mean that they're income for purposes of, her needs and so forth. The Vampire Diaries work that she filmed in 2011 to 2012, that was indeed during the time period of the IVF. Yeah, Janina. And if you knew that, you might have elicited that on direct instead of waiting until redirect after your client got called out on her bullshit and only then fesses up that, oh, well, it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that. When she's really concerned about being precise with her testimony since she's under oath, Janina, you really kind of led her astray with that. Janina will be thrown under the bus. We all know this. Okay. It's just a matter of time until Janina is thrown under the bus. But yeah, might have elicited that. Somehow it's going to all be Janina's fault, that she lied about this stuff. How did this come about that she was traveling to Atlanta for the filming? So she explains, I auditioned for one episode and it was shooting the next week and we had just finished a cycle. So I was off for 2 weeks. So I booked the role. And then when I got to Atlanta, they told me that it was a very important recurring role. And so we were able to find time around the IVF schedule to film other episodes. She says it's if it's a recurring role and not a regular role, you're allowed to decline that. It's not, but it's not a good thing. So you had to be in LA, but apparently not that hard to work around. This production was happy to work around you. So any reason other productions wouldn't as well? She couldn't say exactly when in the 2011-2012 time period it filmed, but she needed to be in Atlanta. She says during that time period about 6 times, but actually maybe more than that because there were 6 episodes that she filmed. And so she probably had to go there more than that. But they were able to work around the IVF schedule so she could do as many episodes as she could. And it's not as many as they wanted her to do. Not as many as they wanted her, so much more. But she was able to do as many as she could. And she also had a young daughter, Ella, then too, by the way. Remember Ella? I had a young daughter too. Yeah. Hmm. Yes, we haven't forgotten. We haven't forgotten, Alice, but that wasn't your explanation. And I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything at this point. She's not the only actress who played Esther. We all know that. So what happened? This is objected to as beyond the scope, and it's also irrelevant. This is sustained. Ellis really wanted to explain it's not that she was fired from being Esther. It's not that she was fired. It was some other creative thing, probably her idea even. I'll bet the producers thanked her for coming up with the great idea of having Esther be replaced in later seasons by different actresses. Nothing further. That's the end of Janina's redirect. So Alice is done. Alice is done with her testimony. It hasn't gone well for her. Definitely could have gone a hell of a lot worse, though. They go through, Janina is going to rest, but they go through this process. We want to check, make sure all the exhibits that we wanted are in, and some of these are confused and and then clarify that the attorney fee issue, they are going to do that separately, have a whole separate hearing and process to handle attorney fees. So that, along with the ex parte ruling from February 10th, it said it was reserved for trial, but they're going to continue that. The February 10 ex parte ruling that they're talking about is the one where it involved her trial brief that she originally filed publicly and then filed the redacted because the original included the information from the child custody evaluation that is not supposed to be revealed under any circumstances in a proceeding like this, and of course got picked up by the Daily Mail and published. So Ioan had asked for sanctions related to that. That is all being handled separately. So we're not litigating that at this point. The judge says we're going to be setting up a different process, a whole new different process for the trial on attorney fees, sanctions, and so forth. Its own exhibits, witnesses, and so forth. Oh, brother. To the extent we thought we're done, no, there's going to be another little mini trial, guys. There's going to be another little mini trial. After clarifying all of that, Janina rests. Joe just clarifies he wants the court to, one of the things Janina had lodged, wanted to clarify, make sure I've lodged this transcript from September 2020. I didn't get the year right. She says a September 15th minute order, September 15th hearing. And Joe just wanted to make sure that the minute order, the court would pay attention to that along with the transcript. Don't know what's in the minute order, but the judge says he will do that. So now we go to the petitioner's rebuttal case, and we call Ioan Gruffudd back to the stand. We start with the Exhibit 26A, which is that schedule of debts and assets, the community property balance sheet that his accountant prepared, and they had it had been submitted to Alice's accountant. And so they've gone through and kind of characterized everything. Asked about separate property accounts that he owned at the time of the marriage, he identifies that he had two Halifax accounts, a Coutts account, it's Coutts, another foreign bank, I guess. His Royal Bank of Scotland account didn't exist at the time of the marriage. He established that one in 2020 using funds from his Barclays account, which existed at the time of the marriage. And he had used about $100,000 transfer from the Barclays account to open the Scotland account. I'm not sure where we're going with this. So he starts to ask Ioan questions about how do you characterize these accounts as your separate property? These are objected to as calling for a legal conclusion, and that is these objections are being sustained. And we're doing that thing again. Like we already did this with the characterization questions, legal conclusion, sustained, and you just like re-ask the same thing with the characterization. We're doing that again, right? So we re-ask the same question. It's still a problem asking somebody to characterize because the problem is the legal conclusion. Then asked in communications with the forensic accountant, Patrick Green, did he discuss the characterization of those assets? And this is objected to as calling for hearsay, and that is sustained. I don't really love that because the fact of communications is not in and of itself hearsay. However, to the extent that this is trying to open the door to talk about the content of those conversations, then I suppose the judge might have seen that coming and said, no, we're not going to do that. At this point, we have a break. And it's fairly long. It's like probably 40 minutes or so because the judge apparently gets a phone call and he explains part of his duties as the judge means that when other judges call, newer judges or whatever, he has to be available to answer their questions or whatever. So we have this long break for the judge to take this phone call from another judge. And then when we come back, he's apologetic, ate up some of the morning time. Yes, it did. We go back to questions about, Ioan's position on the Royal Bank of Scotland account. Janina now objects to this as beyond the scope. And I hate to say it, but I'm with Janina on this one. I'm not seeing what's going on here. I don't understand. I don't know why we're talking about this. And the judge is clearly confused as well. He says, I want an offer of proof. How is this rebuttal? What is this rebutting? Joe says this is rebutting the characterization of assets because Alice claims that her accounts are separate property and his are community property. And the judge says, so where in evidence is there a dispute over the characterization of the Royal Bank of Scotland account? And Joe says, well, it's in this exhibit 26A, the community property balance sheet, which is his exhibit in the footnotes. And the judge says, but where in the record is Alice claiming that it's community property? And Joe says, well, this is all interconnected because she's claiming the C-Hor account is separate. And the judge says, but you're asking about another account. And so Janina's saying, we're claiming that it's community property. Janina has her opportunity. She says, we are claiming that it's community property because that's how Mr. Green presented it to us back in the exhibit 26. And then there's also the exhibit 28, which is the itemized list of differences between the experts where they disagree on things. And everything, says that they're in agreement, except for, you get to the second line, which is the C-Hor account, and that's where there's a dispute. And so judge says, so it appears that there's an agreement on how to handle this Royal Bank of Scotland account. And Joe says, well, Mr. Green said that they're community property because they can't trace them. And judge says, that's not what he said. That's not the testimony. The only account that is in dispute is a C-Hor account. And Joe says, no, we've consistently said that it's separate property. And the judge at this point is like getting kind of irritated. And he's like, Mr. Green did not say that. He agreed with Ms. Lesgert on the characterization. And Joe says, well, my client has always maintained they're his separate property nevertheless. And the judge reiterates, the accountants agree on everything but C-Hor. And they're just really like going back and forth on this. The judge like rolls his eyes And he says the tracing evidence is only related to the C-Hor account. That's all Patrick Green testified to. He says you've thoroughly confused me now, and I'm perplexed by what you're doing because it is far outside the field of rebuttal. Janina steps up at this point and says this is prejudicial because the accountants have been released. And as far as I know, the accountants have been in agreement with the exception of the C-Hor account. Mr. Green prepared the balance sheet. Ms. Lesgert ID'd differences. So she adopted his characterization of assets, and to suddenly change that now is prejudicial. The judge now pulls out the community property balance sheet and says, it's got it's got the accounts identified. It's got a name next to it. It shows the characterization and the agreement the accountants reached. And so what you are trying to do here, Joe, is outside the scope of the evidence. Explain to me why I'm incorrect. And Joe says you're incorrect because you can look at the footnotes. Ioan has maintained it's his separate property. The judge says it is apples and oranges. If it's his separate property account, it will be awarded to him. Why are we doing this? Janina, then he's like misread the document. Janina says to clarify, the name is just how the account is held. It's how it's titled. There's a different column that sets out the characterization of the account. And the treatment by Mr. Green was that all of the accounts, besides his Halifax account, were community property. And Ms. Lesgart accepted his characterization, except as to the C-Hor account. And so the judge says, so you would be contradicting, Joe, your own accountant. Is that right? And Joe says, yes. Yes, that's right. Yes. He wants to impeach Patrick Green. He says, Ioan has never conceded, and I heard argument yesterday that it would still be separate property even without tracing. And the judge says that's argument, not evidence. And yeah, he's right. That is argument, not evidence. And Joe says we contend that both of the Halifax accounts, the Coots account and the Royal Bank of Scotland account, are separate property. And the judge says, in spite of your own expert's testimony, and Joe says yes, because it's a yes, but because Mr. Green took the approach that if you can't trace, it's community property. So the judge is like, Janina, I'll hear from you. And she starts to like, well, Your Honor. And he kind of intercedes again. He says, I'm inclined to allow this testimony, and rebutting his own expert at this stage of the process, like in the rebuttal case, goes a long way towards the total credibility of Ioan's case. So you might want to let this in, Janina. Telling her Joe is making an enormous mistake, just like when Joe was objecting to Alice's testimony, or the testimony about Alice not disclosing assets in the prenup disclosure. And the judge is like, this is beneficial for you. I'm not going to strike it. I'm going to let you to use it to your advantage. Doing the same thing now for Janina. Janina, Joe is really fucking up here. Okay, because this is going to create a big mess. It's going to undermine his credibility. You might want to just let him go ahead and do this. This is a shit show. This is a shit show. I don't know how to explain this. I understand the thinking behind this. I understand the thinking behind this. The thinking behind this is that Richard Green, I keep calling him Richard Green because of Karen Reed, Patrick Green took the consistent position that if we cannot trace an asset, we are treating it as community property. Alice's accountant takes the position that, based on the language of the prenup that we looked at that during the last session, There's language in the prenup that says, it's tricky. It doesn't, commingling doesn't necessarily change the character of the asset. So because of that, Diana Lesgert says you don't have to trace. So therefore the C4 account is Alice's separate property, notwithstanding that she made deposits, apparently rather large ones, into that account during the marriage that are not accounted for. So I understand the point that Joe is kind of trying to make here, which is that what is good for the goose is good for the gander. And so if that doesn't apply to Alice's, then it also shouldn't apply to Ioan's. The problem is you are now in your rebuttal case. And this is not a surprise. You have known since before trial that this is the position that they were going to take. And you did nothing to set any of this up with Richard Green to establish, Richard Green, I did it again, Patrick Green, to establish any of this evidence about how the accounts are similar, how they're different, why they need to be treated equivalently. Waited like until the 11th hour when it's not really at issue anymore, and you've already put on contrary testimony to now come back and say, never mind. Part of the reason why this is a huge problem is because the community property balance sheet, it's like a big math problem. It's a big math problem. We got all these things. This is separate. These are community. Here's the different interests. Here's who's owed this for what, and so forth. And so if you go in and you start just sort of willy-nilly changing some things, it changes the entire math. And you're essentially throwing that on the judge to do himself, because you didn't have your accountant do it, even though you knew they were taking this position. And so if you wanted to use their logic against them, the time to do that was in your trial preparation. So I'm just mind blown by what the fuck is this strategy? This is so not good. This is so not good. The judge is telling you explicitly, this is not good. You impeaching your own expert, he's wrong about the separate property versus the community property. This is not good. But we're going to gung-ho ahead anyway. I'm really, really alarmed by this. Really alarmed by this. Ioan is sitting up at the stand during all of this, and he's taking it in, and he can see this is not going well. And he's not an idiot. He can hear the judge saying, Joe, you're fucking this up for your client. Really want to go down this road? And Joe's saying, yes, I do. And Ioan you can see it in his face. Do we? I felt so bad for him, because it was very clear at this point that he knew, we don't want to go this direction. But he doesn't have anybody else in the courtroom to rely on. He's kind of stuck with Joe. What do you do? What do you do if your lawyer is insisting on going down this road? It's not going to help to fight with your lawyer over strategy while you're on the stand. I mean, I felt terrible for him. So Joe asked him, Ioan, do you contend that these accounts are your separate property? And you can see him wheels turning. What the fuck am I supposed to do? It's got nobody else to trust in this whole process but Joe. Sunk cost, man. You're kind of stuck with it at this point. Yes, he does contend these accounts are his separate property. Wayne Mejia, he says, did not manage Alice's finances before the marriage, only his. This is a contradiction to Alice. They did not have any joint accounts before the marriage. Again, this is in contradiction to Alice saying they had joint accounts and Wayne Mejia, managed and her residuals went into the joint account and so forth. Mejia did not represent Alice at the time of the prenup. That is a change from his previous testimony. And because he had, when he was asked before, did Wayne assist Alice with the prenup? He had said yes before. He says now no. And the reason why he is changing his previous testimony is because he had reviewed a letter that Wayne Mejia had sent to his lawyer who prepared the premarital agreement. And at that, reviewing that letter, he realized he'd made an error and that Mr. Mejia had represented Ioan and Ioan alone before the marriage and during the time of the premarital agreement. There's a lot of word objectioning during this part of the testimony because they keep talking about Wayne representing. And the judge doesn't like this use of language because he's a financial manager and, not a lawyer or something like that. Doesn't want to use the word representing, wants us to use working for his safety as much as for everybody else's. Once again, I think this would carry so much more weight if it came from Wayne, if at all possible, rather than from Ioan, because the problem is when it's just Ioan versus Alice, it's easy for the judge to say, well, it's he said, she said, and either resolve it on credibility or, not really consider it an issue at all. If Wayne Mejia himself were to come in and testify, yeah, no, I didn't represent Alice. And no, I didn't help her do anything with the premarital agreement. That's going to tend to carry a little bit more weight, I think, with the judge, because this is the third party. They don't have a dog in the fight as far as the divorce goes. But I don't know if that was feasible or anything like that. It's just that, without documentation, without substantiation, it's just his word versus her word. And that's never the strongest place to be in a factual dispute. The exhibits that were attached to the premarital agreement, according to Ioan, were prepared by the attorneys. Exhibit A was prepared by his attorney. Exhibit B was provided by Alice's attorney. Mr. Mejia had provided Ioan's financial disclosures to his attorney for the premarital agreement. And the way that the exhibits are presented, the reason why he knows that these exhibits are not based on Wayne's disclosure, that the attorneys presented them, is because they aren't consistent with how Mr. Mejia would present these schedules, because he's very, Wayne has prepared a lot of these things, and Ioan is very familiar with how he prepares those things, and the format, layout, etc. of the exhibits are not consistent with that. Mr. Mejia started working for Alice only after they got married. He filed joint tax returns. He looked after their joint accounts. And as time went on, he may have worked for Alice on other matters as well. But there was no agreement for Mr. Mejia to manage Alice's accounts before the marriage. Alice's GoFundMe. Alice first set up the GoFundMe account in June of 2022. He was aware of it because there were many social media posts about it, and he had also seen the site itself. We're at this point at lunch, so we're going to pause. And Judge wants to know, do we have a hard stop time? He's really pushing on getting out early today. Joe says he's got about 45 minutes. Janina says it depends. So we are continuing after lunch. They had originally, thought we're going to be done by noon. No, we're not. So we'll come back at 1:30 and see where we're at that point. This is where I'm getting in bad shape. starting to regret my breakfast choice for the morning, which I'm like, I'm totally 99% sure that's what it is, because I mean, you can kind of tell. And like, I'm so much better today, like nothing. It's not like I got a stomach virus or something like that. But I'm starting to feel pretty miserable. I got a headache. I'm getting like the intermittent hot and cold. You sweat and then you shiver, and I'm nauseous. Like, it's pretty uncomfortable. So I'm just like, please fucking get done, because this is gonna be like the worst afternoon in court in my life. And so my notes, I will warn you, my notes for the afternoon. I of course still did my best, but they may not have been as thorough, because there were times I had to just like stop and kind of head down and wait for life to return to my body. So Joe estimated when we got back from lunch, which by the way, I basically just like spent in the courthouse with my head down. I couldn't eat. It was not good. But when we come back, Joe estimates, again, he's got about 45 minutes left. So what did Alice say in her initial post about the reason for the GoFundMe? And Ioan said, she said that, her life had fallen apart and she was a struggling single mother and she had exhausted all of her funds. She couldn't buy food or pay the lawyers. But at the time, she was living at the family home. I was paying all of the expenses. I was overpaying support. And she had around $100,000 in her own accounts at the time. And by the way, while she was living at the home, she was living there rent-free, and Ioan paid the mortgage. Couldn't get to it with Alice. Waited too long to ask Alice about this, but he gets it about with Ioan. Now, would have been nice if we had exhibits of that original GoFundMe, because she's changed it since then. When she did the relaunch, based on the eviction, she changed the language of it. Would have been really nice and really easy to admit that as an exhibit if they had it. But he didn't do that. And I just don't like so much of this being a he said, she said, even though I think from my perspective, it's pretty clear that Ioan wins the credibility battle. The problem is that judges, they don't like to pick sides. They're not going to, if you're not in a criminal case, only very rarely going to have it in their minds that like this person is good, this person is bad. Like you have to really be extreme to get to that point. That was kind of what at least I was expecting the approach to be in the trial of this case, because there is so much material here to work with, to show. Alice is the primary problem here. And Alice has a problem with consistency and veracity. And here's a gazillion examples of that. And, here she is doing it on the stand and so forth. Maybe they got there enough. But the way that the judge was kind of running interference for her during the morning with Joe's questions, it just gave me the impression that he's got a lot more sympathy for her still than I would want him to at this stage in the trial, than he should, had there been a good use of all of the evidence and material that they had to work with here. Maybe I'm being too hard on him. I don't know. Entirely possible. But I don't like this just being left as a he said, she said, and assuming that the judge is going to get it right. If you can corroborate his testimony, you should do that. You should do that. Present the exhibit, but they didn't. Then we go back to Alice paying the nanny in the $48,000 in May and June of 2025. Also, that was in May and June of 2022. She paid the $48,000 total. She renewed the GoFundMe in 2025. This was a little bit confusing. I think what he was getting at was the original GoFundMe was in June of 2022, and this is at the same time that she's, paying the year ahead to Gloria. So I'm broke, I can't buy food and so forth, but I can pay a year in advance for my nanny that it's not really clear why I need because I don't work. Broke with the full-time nanny. So I think that's what he was getting at. Then as far as the GoFundMe renewal was in May of 2025, he saw the post for that and the page itself. For this one, she said she needed funds for moving. Nobody would employ her. She said she'd sold all of her belongings. She didn't even start selling her belongings, according to the evidence that we got from the website, The Real Real, until July is when she started. So she had not sold all of her belongings. She had not, in fact, sold anything, as far as we can tell at this point. At the time, Ioan was paying her the $4,500 a month in support. She was also, that was the combined child support and spousal. She also had around $13,000 in her C&B account, and she was going to conventions. And this was the time period too when, remember, she was having all these like mystery deposits. Somehow she was still getting money despite being unable to pay her rent, getting evicted and all that. During the marriage, they had two nannies. The first nanny they had from 2011 until 2015, and that was Rosaria. The second nanny was Gloria. She started in 2015 and continued until the beginning of 2022 when Ioan could no longer afford to pay her. And between the two, there was a gap of only about 4 to 6 weeks. Again, no explanation at this point about why this matters, but the point seems to be pretty clear that from 2011 forward, childcare was taken care of. There was no need for Alice to need to stay home and take care of the kids. They had a nanny the entire time so that both of them could pursue careers. So we turn to this alleged agreement that she would stay home with the kids. There's an objection to how it's the question is phrased the first time, that it misstated her testimony. But as far as her staying home, Ioan says no, there was no such agreement. They had not talked about putting off their careers to raise the girls. They were both pursuing acting careers. They both parented the kids. They had the nanny. And from his perspective, the IVF didn't interrupt her career. He said there were times when projects could be worked around, or that they would need to do workarounds, but there was no evidence that her career as a whole was being put on hold because of IVF. When Alice filmed The Vampire Diaries, remember, but Ella, I also have a young daughter. Yeah, there was also a nanny. And on some of those trips, the nanny went with her. The nanny went with her while she filmed. Another one of those details, that very concerned about being precise Alice somehow failed to mention. Somehow didn't mention that the nanny went with her while she was filming The Vampire Diaries during this time period when she couldn't leave LA. Asked about Alice's testimony concerning a discussion that took place on the beach in Australia and whether her testimony was accurate. He thinks it's not. The judge interjects at this point. What he thinks about her testimony is not relevant. Fair. Just what is the reality of the situation? And he said there was a discussion, not an argument. It was pilot season. She was wanted in Los Angeles. They had done self-tapes from Australia, but her manager wanted her back in Los Angeles. And I encouraged that and said I would help with childcare. Quite a different little picture than Alice presented about that beach meeting. So who is telling the truth? We don't know. It's a he said, she said. It will either come down to credibility or it won't matter anyway. The judge will just disregard this because does it really matter anyway? The discussion, I don't know. After that Australia trip, they went back to Los Angeles. Alice, as far as the his encouragement to her to go back to Los Angeles to do the auditions and not hang out on set in Australia for 5 months. I'm like increasingly curious now about what was filming in Australia during this time frame. I don't know if I can find out real quickly, real easily, but I really was wondering, was this the Fantastic Four? Was this when they were filming that? Did they film that in Australia? I just don't know. I don't know. No, it looks like the Fantastic Four was, oh, it might have been. Wait, it might have been. The Rise of the Silver Surfer came out in 2007. No, so this was all before that. That was all before this time. So yeah, I don't know what was filming down in Australia for 5 months that she was hanging out down there, but he was like done, ready for her to go back to LA. He was encouraging that. Alice didn't agree. Alice didn't agree with that. And so she stayed in Australia until the end of the movie. Had to keep an eye on her property. Now we turn to the problem she claims to have with Joe Vance, her agent, and her claims that Ioan tried to get him to fire her. Those claims are not accurate, Ioan says. He learned that Joe wanted to fire Alice because of her public campaign of abuse of him and Bianca, and he heard that from Mary Ellen. As far as what Joe wanted, he didn't disagree with it, but he didn't seek it out. And he doesn't remember their last conversation, but he has not spoken to Joe since the beginning of 2021. The Welsh film that was brought up that he declined, he identifies the project as Save the Cinema. It was shot in 2021. As far as why he declined it, he says every project is a collective review with the entire team. And they go together, they read the script, they discuss. And after that review, he did not believe that he was right for this role. And the team agreed with him. And so that was his reason for declining. We don't know what role he was offered. For anybody who might be familiar with that movie, I've never heard of it. I do not purport to be a Welsh film expert of any kind. I'm getting well-versed, however, in train videos, the Welsh countryside by train. My grandma is having a hard time sleeping. And so she's found that she sleeps better when these there's like these videos on YouTube, this whole genre of train videos. I had no idea that this existed. But it's just a camera that's mounted on a train, and the train goes places, and you watch the train, go through the countryside on the route and stuff. These videos of these all over the place. But there's actually quite a lot of them in Wales. And so I've become quite familiar with the genre of Welsh train videos. But yeah, other than that, I don't know anything about this movie, so I have no idea what role he might have been up for. But he didn't specify. As far as Alice being practically his second manager, yesterday was the first time he'd ever heard anything like that. So apparently not according to him, the fond nickname that he had for her that she claimed. She was not a member of his team, actual or de facto. But they were, however, involved with each other's careers to the extent that they encouraged each other. They helped with auditions. They helped with taping. And they both parented the kids. There was no conversation that Alice shouldn't work because Ioan was making more money. He also never heard Alice say that she was giving up her career, and he never saw evidence of that. That's rebuttal. That was the rebuttal case. Move on to Cross. We go to right off the bat. Janina is going to go for the jugular because Nothing else. She fights. She's not a righteous warrior, but she is a warrior. She does like to win. And so she's able to read the room when the judge says, "Hey, you want to open this door about the accounts, the characterization, impeach your own accountant, might hurt the credibility of your whole case." Yeah, she hears that and she is able to read the room. Very first thing we do, let's go take a look at this this community property balance sheet. And so she says, even though the accounts are community property, you say that they're separate. This is objected to, and the court agrees that it's misstating both the testimony and the exhibit. She asks, how are the accounts characterized on this document? That's objected to as calling for a legal conclusion, and that is sustained. But ultimately, she establishes that he believes the accounts listed at lines 5 to 10 are his separate property. They are not listed, however, on Exhibit A of the prenup. There's an objection to the term listed, and that is sustained. So we turn now to the prenup and the Exhibit A. The Halifax account is not there, the Royal Bank of Scotland account, the Coutts account, they're not specifically listed on the exhibit. So the Royal Bank account of Scotland, we kind of point out again, it was opened in 2020. And so, well, you know, after the marriage, it was funded with the Barclays account. Is it true he hasn't produced documents reflecting that transfer? Yes, that apparently is true. And there are no documents showing that these Halifax accounts existed as of the time of 2007. None for the Coutts, none for the Barclays. The judge points out that Exhibit A to the prenup says cash and equivalents, UK bank accounts, parentheses, 8. And so we establish that the 8, what does that consist of? The 2 Halifax accounts, Coutts account, the Barclays account, and there were 3 other Barclays accounts that he had that were no longer in existence at the time of the separation. The judge wants to know, why are the accounts not listed specifically in Exhibit A? So now listed is okay, like when the judge asked, but he says he does not know why. And he agrees that they doesn't believe that they are specifically listed anywhere else in the prenup. This is a little bit potentially of sloppy drafting of the prenup. We can actually go back to it, right? Because I still have it up. You can look at the exhibit and see cash and equivalents. They just have this UK bank accounts, parentheses 8, and the total figure. That's a lot of money. And so all of these others, you know, they're spelled out specifically, but these are not. And yeah, that does seem a little bit sloppy to me, because in terms of being able to identify what exactly is this agreement affecting, that's a little bit of a problem. We don't know. We don't know what these 8 accounts were. So we have Ioan's testimony, but his testimony is going to be self-serving, like just, you know, by its nature on this particular issue. So that's potentially not a great way to write up the prenup like that. We don't have any explanation for then why not just go trace it. Does Wayne not have the statements? Do you not have the statements? Is it impossible to get the statements now? Is there no way to go back to old tax returns or anything like that to get proof of the existence of these accounts? I don't understand the lack of any effort to trace it. If it did, in fact, you know, as he's testifying to, exist at the time of the marriage, pre-existed the marriage, then that should be able to be substantiated. And I don't know why they didn't do that. We didn't get any kind of explanation about it or question about it or anything. So once again, I'm a little bit baffled about the strategy. If Ioan's position throughout has been it's his separate property, but the accountant is saying it's community because I can't trace it, then you reconcile that by helping your accountant trace it. And I don't know why that didn't happen. It seems like it was just sort of written off, okay, like a concession. We'll just treat it as community property then. I don't have an explanation for many of these decisions that have been made along the way. As far as his claims, his testimony that the exhibits were prepared by the respective attorneys, he does not have personal knowledge of that. He concedes. No personal knowledge that it was Alice's lawyer that prepared her Exhibit B. At the time of the prenup, Mejia was his business manager, and he provided the information for the creation of the Exhibit A. And upon completion of the premarital agreement, both he and Alice requested that Wayne keep the original document, that Wayne hold on to that. But despite that, he was not her business manager. I don't know what that's kind of supposed to be telling about, but whatever. The GoFundMe renewal that was taking place in 2025, in May of 2025, he agrees Alice was being evicted. Her rent at the time was $6,500 a month. As far as agreements concerning careers, he reiterates there were none. As far as the guarantees that they had, talks about the quote, their quotes. A little bit of a conversation about what that means. He understands that to mean that the amount a studio would pay an actor for a particular role. We don't get specifics, but during the last 5 years in the marriage, he does agree his quote was substantially higher than Alice's quote. Of course it was. Of course it was. He's a talented actor. She's a problem. Of course his quote is quite a bit higher. His testimony was that both of them parented the kids and they had the nanny. But in 2018 to 2019, he was out of the country during that time period filming. So how did you parent the kids from Australia? Bitchy question. Joe objects. Judge is not happy with this question either. It's not relevant. He did. Lots of people parent kids from somewhere else, and we are not penalizing him for traveling to work. Lots of people do that. How did you parent kids from Australia? Well, he provided for them. He talked to them. He made sure that they had the nanny, checked in. You do what you can when you're not on the ground. I mean, this was really super bitchy. Judge wasn't impressed with that question. And Janina's like, well, I'm just saying, well, but. If you got something to say, Janina, just ask it. You don't have to ask these bitchy, argumentative questions. If your point is you didn't put the children to bed at night, you didn't prepare their food, you didn't take them to school, you didn't take them to after-school activities, you can just ask those things specifically. Yes, that's correct. He didn't do those aspects of parenting from Australia. Of course not. But that is, why marriage is intended to be a partnership. Most people don't have to hire a nanny for their stay-at-home wife to make sure that these things are being done for the children, because most people expect the spouse, the partner, to do those things themselves. But this is one of those things where it's like the point was just to be a bitch. It wasn't to get information. It wasn't even really to make a factual point. It was just to do this, like stick the finger. How did you parent your kids from Australia? The judge was not impressed with that. During the last 5 years of the marriage, how many nights alone did he spend with the kids? Meaning Alice wasn't there, the nanny wasn't there. Estimate how many times He estimated about 7 or so. And how did he come up with that number? Well, that was when she would be in Atlanta working. That's right. Remember? Remember, Janina? She would go to Atlanta. She was filming. Then he's there with the kids. Redirect. Redirect testimony. Were you ever requested to produce account records as of the date of the marriage? No, he was never asked. Joe. Tracing is the responsibility of the party claiming it's separate property. I don't like this question. This is blame shifting. It is your job. If you are going to present a case that this account is his separate property, you have to prove it. It's not, they didn't ask. It is your job to be proactive. This is another instance of the lack of proactivity and the lack of solving your own problem that has gotten me really frustrated. And I don't think I'm alone. I'm really feeling like, I'll just tell you, like the vibe I'm getting from the judge at this point in time, you can take this completely for what it's worth or nothing at all, because there's no way to know. But, you just get a sense from how the judge interacts with the people, how he treats them, the questions he asks, the way that he handles the objections, all that. My sense is he prefers Ioan's case to Alice's case, but he prefers Alice's lawyer to Ioan's lawyer. I think he's having a real hard time with, how Joe has conducted this litigation. And it concerns me. It concerns me because you don't want the lawyer to be a liability. It's like the last thing that you should do. Rule number 1 of trial work: don't piss off the person that's deciding the case. It's just rule number 1. They're deciding it. Stay on their good side. And I'm just getting quite an impression from this judge that Joe is not on his good side. Now, I don't think he loves Janina, but I think he likes much better the case that she has presented. And by and large, her case does seem to be better organized, more consistent. Certainly we're not like changing lanes on day 11 at the very end, going in a whole new direction. I don't necessarily like her arguments. I don't particularly agree with many of her positions, but I can't fault her for not being consistent and for not presenting a case that is, it's much easier to understand what she put on and why than it is from Joe. And so that's where I'm just, I'm just a little frustrated, and I'm picking up on the judge, being in that same boat. It doesn't matter if anybody asked. If you want to claim it's your separate property, you have to prove that. I didn't like that question at all. Same thing with the Barclays transfer to the Royal Bank of Scotland. No, he was never asked. It's your job to prove it. It's not Ioan's fault. He's not supposed to know any of this stuff, but the lawyer knows that and the accountant knows that. So why did nobody tell him, hey, if you want to claim these as your separate property, you need to go and get these documents so that we can show. And then at least we know what we have to work with. I'm so baffled. I'm so baffled by this approach. The eviction in May of 2025, he did know that Alice was being evicted because he saw the notice. He was sent the notice, the eviction notice, via counsel, and also Alice was posting about it online. Did she have money in her account to pay the rent at the time? This is objected to as exceeding the scope of cross, and that is sustained. Yes. Yeah, you should have asked that on fucking direct. They rested. At this point, they rested. The evidence is now closed. We're going to need another day to have the argument. They go through the scheduling. They agree on May 6th They have all day except for a short motion hearing that the judge has to hear at 1:30. So from 1:30 to 2:30, he'll be in something else. But otherwise, they have the whole day to do their arguments. The judge asked about whether anybody had ordered the transcripts, because I think he's wondering about getting copies of them. Joe indicates he has ordered the transcripts. He hasn't received all of them, but he has ordered them. And so he will lodge them with the court so that they will be available for the judge to be able to read through. The judge was asking because apparently the way that they have their system set up in this courthouse, the court reporter, is doing his stenography. And the way these things typically work now is, it's all computerized. And so it kind of creates a real-time transcript. But because it's phonetic, it doesn't always pick everything up. It doesn't like translate the phonetic stenographic language into, human words 100% accurately. So they always, what they do is that this like live thing, it produces a draft, and then the court reporter goes back through and edits it and finalizes it. So the judge is getting in real time the draft transcript that the court reporter is preparing. But so what he expressed is, it's sometimes it's not complete, or just when it's not edited, it's not good for him to rely on. So that's why he was wanting to have the transcripts and was grateful that those would be made available. It also means that anybody who's interested, you want to see for yourself. I definitely don't purport to be, I'm not a photographic memory. I'm often kind of summarizing things as best as I can, not getting stuff word for word. There's parts I have to leave out and so forth. I really just try to capture the big picture and the, overall meaning of what it is that I'm seeing in court. But if you want the whole thing verbatim, the fact that Joe has ordered all the transcripts means that subsequent copies are far less expensive to obtain than if you're the first person out of the gate to go and order it. So they will be out there. The judge had a couple of comments, which are really questions. First, there are apparently local rule 5.9. The judge brings up local rule 5.9, which apparently requires the parties to lodge their last 2 years of state and federal tax returns. He wants to know, have the parties done that? Because he needs that at least for the fee part of this case. That's going to be separate. He needs that under the rule. Joe says we lodged whatever we were ordered. And Janina said, well, I think the order was to exchange them and not to file them. From what we've heard, there's been a little bit of an issue. Alice hasn't filed taxes according to her declarations, her financial statements and so forth that she's been filing in court. The last time she filed taxes was the last time Ioan filed a joint tax return for her before the status separation on the marriage. They were considered formally divorced. She hasn't filed since then. That's a couple of years ago. So be interesting to see how that goes. The judge told them just bring them at the closing, bring them for the closing argument and lodge them at that time. It requires the last 2 years of state and federal tax returns, including as well any other returns like foreign returns in the last 2 years, together with all schedules. Can't wait to see these. Well, we won't see them because they're lodged, but just to see whether anything gets lodged at all. Then as well, Rule 5.9 requires copies of paycheck stubs, all sources of income, and any public assistance for the last 6 months, as well as loan and credit applications within the last 2 years. Any and all loan and credit applications. So we'll see. Again, these are lodged, not filed, so we don't get to see them. The court only gets to see them. But just the fact of whether they end up being produced or not will be interesting to see. The judge then had another question concerning the pending RFO that was filed on July 1st of 2024. This is kind of what, I mean, it's not because the whole trying to get this case to trial has been going on for years now. But the RFO that Alice filed back in July of 2024 is still outstanding. It kind of kicked off, this process of getting temporary support agreed and then litigated and so on and so forth. So it's never actually been ruled on, and it is still technically up for debate at this trial. And so the judge says his question is, what is the effect of this RFO on the orders that are being requested? Specifically, is this going to raise issues of retroactive application? So if he does order spousal support, to what extent does the fact that she filed this RFO back in July of 2024, is there going to be an issue of it needs to be retroactive to a certain point? So Joe said, we explained these issues have been, he says withheld. I think he just means that they've been continued. The judge asked if temporary orders are needed at this point. Joe says no. Janina doesn't say anything. I think maybe she would like to have invited it. You should have spoken up, Janina. Yes. But probably not, because they do have a temporary order currently in effect, right? That's the agreed order that goes all the way back to September of 2024. Child support, the $3,000 a month, the spousal of $1,500. Pretty sure that we're still in that. But the judge basically wants to be advised if that's resolved. So that's the issue. I saw that there was a minute order. Somebody sent me. There was a question about a minute order that got filed from yesterday's hearing that was specific to this RFO. It's because anytime there is an event, they actually talked about this in court because of the when they were talking about the September 15th minute order, whatever it was, there was a whole discussion about how there were actually 3-minute orders. And it's because there were 3 separate events on the calendar for the day. There was an RFO, there was a trial setting conference, there was something else. And so each event under their rules, the court has to prepare a minute order for. So the fact that this RFO has trailed all the way to trial means it's a separate event. They have to do a minute order for it. And so this is just basically the status. They're continuing to kick it forward to trail everything else. But the judge has some questions about, does this open issue, open questions about, is there retroactivity, or has it been fully resolved? He then gives them, once again, the words of advice about preparing for the argument. He says, my decision will have a review of the procedural history of the case. He needs to make clear that the court is not called upon to make decisions about custody or child support specifically. And so they need to, in their arguments, state the agreements that have been reached very specifically. He says he usually proceeds with spousal last. That's the last thing that he addresses in an order, but it might be a little bit different here because of the prenup. So the stipulation, he needs to know where it is. We need to know the status of it. This after hearing a lot about how the stipulation was a problem because of the domestic violence restraining order and the presumption that she shouldn't have custody and so forth. And so he wouldn't be able to make this stipulation part of the final order. Still very unclear where that's going. There's been no other real follow-up. We haven't heard anything from Ioan's custody lawyer, haven't heard anything about meet and confer, haven't heard anything about a new stipulation. Still a big mystery. What's going to happen with all of that? And that it doesn't speak well for the court system, does it? It doesn't speak well for the court system when it comes to these children. The whole reason they have this rule is based on what is in the best interest of the children and make sure that the courts are carrying that out. And it's not in the best interest of the children to be in the custody of a domestic abuser unless certain conditions have been met. That is what the legislature has determined. And so this doesn't make this process look like a real font of integrity. This doesn't look like a real concerted effort to look out for the best interests of the children and to follow the law. It really kind of looks like they're looking for a workaround. How can we work around this? How can we work around this problem? How can we work around the fact that we're just all going to apparently ignore the best interests of the children and leave them in the custody of the domestic abuser without the conditions having been met? I know the judge doesn't want to reopen custody. I know probably Ioan doesn't want to reopen custody. They already went down this road. We saw where it went. We saw like the doors that it opens up in terms of Alice's behavior and the stress to the children and so forth. We know why already. They just reached this agreement. So, I understand, but the law is the law. And so it really needs to be grappled with. The fact that like this is all that came up. This is like the only time this was mentioned a month down the road from when it first came up, and seemed like it was, the judge brought it up several times. Like, this is important. You guys are going to have to figure this out. Now it's just like, well, it's a thing. Don't forget it's a thing. So it's a little bit of an insight into the quality of the justice that you look for and I guess should expect from the family court, which is quite depressing. But I kind of said from the outset, I don't think Alice is going to agree to a stipulation that says she has to do anger management, she has to do drug and alcohol testing, stuff like that. She's not going to agree to that because she won't comply. And so then if she doesn't comply, she's in contempt, and now, custody is at issue and so forth. So she's never going to agree to that. So there's not going to be a way to bring this custody situation into compliance with the law. And I think what they're going to ultimately do is just kick the can down the road. We'll do a final order on the dissolution, but not address custody. And so I guess, in that sense, it's not going to be a final judgment. The case is just going to stay open until the kids age out. That's really what I think is going to happen. And the only kind of hope I have, I guess, for maybe something more direct taking place is the fact that they have this order to show cause hearing set in for August of this year. Show cause if this case has not been completely finished by then, come in and show cause why. That's really my only hope. But the problem is that, the show cause is for the judge's benefit. And so he can say, oh, well, because you can't sort it out. So that's why, and that's fine. Oh. And so once again, like the kids are kind of the afterthought in all of this. This whole thing that is supposed to be designed around the best interests of the kids. And we're just here looking for a workaround. It's kind of depressing, isn't it? Continuing with his advice about the arguments as far as the claimed ambiguities in the premarital agreement, please tell me specifically what you think is ambiguous. For example, there's been this whole, use of royalties versus residuals, the term passive income, etc. State what you think is ambiguous and what your position is on it. On the community property balance sheet items, show me where those areas of dispute are and what your respective positions are. He says this whole process is like a letter to the Court of Appeals when he writes an opinion. He says he does not take an appeal personally. his goal is to get it right. And so he simply wants the parties to help him do that. He orders that the exhibits at this point be returned to the parties. I think he means like their own copies, not the ones that the court has accepted. But they brought in copies for the witness. They brought in copies for the clerk. So take all of those with them. They did. And then we were done. We finished about 2:30 in the afternoon or so, maybe close to 3. I was suffering at this point. I was so glad that this court was done. Made it like to the hotel, to the taxi, to the airport in like this haze. Slept on the floor of the airport, and then I felt better. Then I started to feel better. But this is not my best afternoon personally. But if nothing else, we get to celebrate the closing of at least a stage. At least we get to celebrate being one step closer to this whole thing being done. I mean, I can't lie. I have a lot less confidence at this point that it's going to be done justly. It's going to be done the way that I think that the facts that we know about publicly and what we've seen would warrant. Because I just think there's been too much that's been left off of the table, and the pieces haven't been put together clearly enough for the judge to see. There's still argument, of course, to put all of this together. And Joe does argue well. I liked his argument on the DVRO. He makes good points. And so he still has an opportunity to make all of this clear. Here's why I brought this up. Here's what this relates to, and so forth. The reason why it concerns me a little bit is because even though we have this premise that, juries are the same. You don't make the decision until after all the evidence is in, and they get instructions to that effect, and so forth. And the judge is in the same position. So he's theoretically going to be doing the same thing. But there's not really any way not to be processing information as you receive it, and to be thinking about it and kind of, forming like interim judgments or opinions about it, even if they're just basic things like, I'm not sure I believe that, or, she seems like a lunatic, or whatever. There are these things that you just can't, we're not robots. We are cognitive beings made to process information. And so when volumes of information are presented to us, that's what we're going to do with them. And yes, we can avoid being like, I'm going to make the final decision. I'm not going to make the final decision until I have all the information. There are just so many little judgments that are happening along the way that are going to color how you receive these arguments, and how that, plays into your ultimate decision. That I am a little bit skeptical. I'm just a little bit skeptical of the ability of a closing argument to make up for what to me is just a real shortcoming in the storytelling aspect of trial. Because he wasn't told, the judge wasn't told, here's what the case is about and here's how we're going to prove it. During the presentation of the evidence, it was, quite often just disjointed. Like this morning's cross was kind of a good example. Here's all these exhibits. They're in evidence now. There's no question about them. They are just in a vacuum. We have no idea what they mean. Had there been an opening that told us, had there been like questions about them that at least gave us some kind of hint about why these matter, then we would understand the story a lot better. But as we sit here today, based on the evidence that's been presented, really not clear to me what the story is for why spousal support should be terminated. we know that there's a DVRO that's been reissued, and there was a campaign of abuse and so forth. And so, I mean, if all we're relying on is that, and just the public policy that a domestic violence victim shouldn't have to continue to support his abuser 5 years after he's left and moved on with his life, then why did we even have this part of the trial at all? It's just so baffling. It's just so baffling. Maybe that is going to be all they rely on. I don't know. It's just there was so always with the, what ifs. There it just kills me. There was so much here to work with. So many ways to show that the abuse hasn't just been, the smear. The abuse ties into, yes, she wanted to affect his career, but she also wanted to continue to be the leech. She wanted to continue to suck his blood dry without having to do a damn thing for herself. Maybe that's come through. I really feel like, to the extent it has, it's not really that much attributable to the plaintiff's case. It's been the own goals that Alice did herself, volunteering in her own direct testimony. Yeah, I lie in public. Just because I say something, I don't. Yeah, I'm not telling the truth. Like, oh God. Alice volunteering, her story, her story about 2 years I can't work, IVF, except the fact that I actually did work. In fact, my biggest role during that time frame. So much of that was just Alice kind of creating her own problem a little bit more than we got the problem presented clearly by the petitioner. So this just reminds me, this takes me back to right when Depp v. Heard was getting started. And I remember Nick Rakita back in the day saying, we're about to watch this trial, and these are wealthy people. They have paid millions of dollars for the best attorneys with the big name firms and all that. So prepare to be underwhelmed. That's really where I'm feeling. It's just, that's where I'm at with this. I'm so underwhelmed by this case that was presented, and it's disappointing. But I'm afraid that my expectation for what could have been might be coloring, my perception of what actually did happen and how did it land with the judge. This is a little bit of the difficulty of being a commentator sometimes, is because the judge is new. If the judge had been on the case the whole time, we'd be in the same position, right? I know everything the judge knows. We've read all the same filings and so forth, but this judge is new to it. So he doesn't have the history. And he's hearing a lot of this stuff for the first time that we've known for a long time. And so it can be challenging to kind of assess, how's that landing? And do you get it? Do you see the big picture? So very hard for me to make a prediction about where this is going to go in light of all that. However, I am willing to make some small predictions. Number one, I think the judge is going to avoid making large, sweeping credibility determinations. This is just, I rarely expect this from judges in civil cases anyway. They love to do it in criminal cases. The defendant's whole family is lying because the officer said something different. Therefore, the officer is more credible, and we discredit everything that the defendant and his entire family said. They do that all the time in criminal cases, but in civil cases, they really don't. And so I don't expect there to be I adopt Ioan's version of events because I think he's more credible than Alice. I adopt Alice's because I think she's more credible than Ioan. I don't expect any kind of grand sweeping treatment of the testimony like that. And so because of that, to the extent possible, I think he is going to try to avoid a lot of the conflicts, the factual conflicts, to the extent that he can. If he can make his ruling without having to resolve them and decide who's telling the truth and who's not, I think he's going to do that. So what does that mean in terms of the ruling? Number one, I think we're going by the prenup. I think that's going to be very clear that we're going by the prenup. So he may just avoid getting into these, whatever they were now. I can't remember all the numbers in California. 4320, the 4320 factors. The default factors for what the judge is supposed to consider in a maintenance award. Wouldn't surprise me if he just disregards that entirely. Because that's where a lot of these disputes come up. And if at the end of the day, we're just going by the prenup itself says the parties are waiving all those rights under those provisions, and the judge doesn't have jurisdiction to order support under those provisions. So it's a very easy out for him to just say, hey, we're going by the prenup. And that's the end of it. I think it's also very possible that the judge is simply going to resolve the issue of like termination of support or whatever as a math problem rather than a like moral problem or policy problem. Because if he can avoid the DV issue, you know, the premarital agreement doesn't say anything about the exception for domestic violence. That is from the California factors. There might be kind of a just argument you could make that's not based where it's like, we're not asking you to apply the factors. We're just asking for like overall public policy, bad idea for victims to have to pay their abuser and so forth. That's the reason to terminate. But that's getting legally complicated. And he's just said, I'm kind of concerned about appeal. Like, I'm not concerned, but I want to get it right. So you need to give me, the way to do it right. And without like some kind of basis in case law or statute or something like that to say that you could do that, then you don't have good assurance that that's right. So the easiest path for him is to just follow the prenup. The problem with the prenup is the prenup says divorce is the maintenance is forever until Alice remarries or cohabitates for 6 months or dies or whatever. So I think one way to solve that is with the math, just the math. Depending on whose, interpretation, whose version of the community property balance sheet he accepts, it could be anywhere from like nothing. Ioan owes her money. If they go with her accountant's calculation, Ioan owes her money and still has to pay her support. Versus they go with Patrick Green's interpretation, where Ioan has overpaid by substantial amounts and he's owed money, and so on and so forth. But just the overpayment, the stipulated overpayment alone, if she's entitled to, has been entitled to roughly $1,500 a month in support throughout this period. And there was 5 months where she was, receiving the $10,000. Say we take out 3 of that, as child support, $7,000. She's getting $6,500. Wait, no, I did that wrong. $5,500 a month more than she's entitled to for 6 months. That's $33,000. $33,000 she was overpaid. I think they came up with something like, it was like 28,000 or something. I don't remember how they did the math. But then that's 22 months. That's like 2 years worth of spousal support. So if he goes hardcore with the premarital agreement and just, hey, it says forever, so that's what we do, then Ioan would get a break, and then we would go back to whatever the premarital agreement says. If he's going to incorporate the factors, then the question becomes, well, okay, we still have this issue of California's public policy is for, spouses to be self-sufficient, to become self-sufficient within a reasonable length of time. Alice has already had 5 years. In another 2 years, will be 7 years from the point of the breakup. So she has had plenty of time, to figure out other career opportunities to get herself back on her feet. She has not been inclined to pursue any of that, and continues to reiterate in her testimony she's not going to do anything that isn't acting or writing. And yet she doesn't have any realistic prospects of being able to support herself from those sources. So it's like conventions or bust, basically. And the problem is going to be the conventions. If she's got one lined up this year, what she said, her highest ever was the 12,000. She hasn't gotten that since. Normally she gets more like the 4 to 5. Okay, $5,000 a year, not going to be self-sustaining. So say the judge looks at that. If he gets, by 7 years after the divorce, perhaps Alice should be self-sustaining at this point. It's half the length of the marriage. And that's where we would be if the judge says, you've overpaid basically 2 years worth of support, so you don't have to pay that. And then by the end of it, that's the time period when we'd expect Alice to be self-sustaining and not need maintenance, spousal maintenance anyway. These are just the kind of thoughts that I have, going through it. And just given the way that I think judges tend to look at, parties and in civil cases and dissolutions and stuff like that. They're not looking to penalize anybody, right? Remember that. This is not a punishment process. He's not interested in holding Alice accountable. He's not interested in, making sure that Alice suffers some kind of consequence for all of this bad behavior. This is all about, the future and the fair division of the assets and the best interests of the children and so on and so forth. So I think to the extent that there was a good case to make about why, the smear campaign, the attack on his career and the way that affected him financially, the just straightforward financial abuse, spending and spending and spending and expecting him to have to fork up to pay for that. I mean, and then that overlaps with the litigation abuse, coming into court and driving up his costs in court because she expects far more than he's capable of providing and is obligated to provide anyway. Just because she wants to insist, I need this. If I don't have $200,000 a year to spend, even that is relative poverty, right? $17,000 a month, relative poverty. That's $202,000 a year to spend. So, there might have been a case to make that you should just terminate it on these kind of moral grounds, right? That this is an unconscionable situation for Ioan to have to continue paying support under these conditions. I just don't think that case has been made, unfortunately. I think the material was there to make it. I don't think it's been made. So my suspicion is that at the end of the day, the judge is not going to, hate Alice, dunk on Alice, have major, decisions based on Alice's lack of credibility and so forth. I think it's going to come down to the path of least resistance and what's kind of easiest for him. And to me, that's likely a combination of enforcing the premarital agreement and doing math based on that. So we'll have to see. Of course, a lot remains to be seen, but we still have to do, the closings, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that, that will change the court's thinking or at least help him focus and clarify his perspective on it. I don't want to be completely dismissive of the potential impact that a good closing can have, because I do think it can. And I mean, it is the last thing that the judge is presented with before he goes and makes his decision. So to the extent all of this evidence is kind of a puzzle, the closing is the chance to put it together for him. And that could change some of this. But we won't know until then. As we sit here right now, not expecting any kind of like big resounding moral victory to come out of all this. So we'll see. We'll see. So May 6th is the closing. I'm going to look at going back down for that. Don't have a firm idea yet one way or the other. But that is starting to be the time where you can like get into some of my favorite areas down there, some of like the Sequoia kinds of areas and stuff. I mean, not that you can't this time of year. It's just, you got to like snow. But it might be nice time for a little time outdoors, a little vacation outside and some of this stuff. So going to look into the possibility, but no firm decision at this point. I will definitely let everybody know if I decide to go down that road. But I would definitely like to hear the closing arguments if I can do that. So we have a comment from 4D Man, James Fallon, Psychopath Inside. Intriguing recommendation, Andrea. Well worth an AB live stream to discuss this book by yourself or with guests. Count me in. I am glad you enjoyed it. I had, there was an article that was published. I can't remember where it was. It was years ago. It might've been the New Yorker or the Atlantic or something like that, but it was the same general idea. And it's like the kind of condensed overview of the sorts of things he was looking at in his book. So I was familiar with kind of the general gist of it a long time ago. But it wasn't until very recently that I read this book. And it really is. For me, it's been one of those that's just been a real paradigm shift about how we think about so many of these conditions, because we're so programmed, I think, mentally towards, psychopathy equals axe murderer, that we aren't able to square that with the prevalence of psychopathy in society and what it actually looks like when it's not associated with this severe social dysfunction, the criminality and so forth. And that's why, he's such a good example to me about like what to look for in the high performing psychopath and how do you spot that? And I've been saying for such a long time, and boy, like now after there was, guys might have heard the stuff in the algorithms about this judge down in Texas who's like taking a bunch of heat for berating the IT. The IT guy came in to fix his computer and he's berating this guy. And then a criminal defense lawyer, a local criminal defense lawyer who has no cases in front of this guy or anything, writes him a letter saying, this was improper and I hope you apologize. And then the judge is like ordering this lawyer into court, and like no basis to do this, calling it an ex parte communication. It's not about a freaking case. Like the judge is like off his rocker, drunk on his own power. I have been like in the back of my mind for so long, like mulling over these ideas about psychopathy on the bench, because status is a thing for psychopaths. And we kind of already know that, right? We know that if you like power and control over people, then you want to find positions where you can exercise that. And so you would expect high functioning psychopathic people to be overrepresented in positions of power. And there's just been so many examples I can think of recently of, red flags about behavior on the bench that might be worth thinking about in light of these insights that Mr. Fallon's book offers, Dr. Fallon's book. So thank you for that comment. I appreciate it. I have from time to time considered doing something like a book club, because I read a lot. I talk a lot about the books that I read and things like that. And it's been suggested to me before. So maybe someday I'll actually like organize something like that. But it's a good recommendation. I'll definitely put that one on my little list of like, ideas of things to explore, because I agree. I think that would be a potentially fun one to go over. Heather, what would your closing strategy be given what was ultimately presented? Of course, we don't know what lots of the admitted evidence was. I think the strategy for closing here needs to be to just orient the judge to the meaning of all of this evidence that's been presented to him. So he's just got like volumes and volumes of bank statements and communications between people and just all of this different stuff. And he doesn't know yet how it relates to what he's being asked to do. So your closing strategy really needs to be, number one, decide real specifically, what the fuck are you actually asking the judge to do? Be specific. This should be able to be just done by reference to your trial brief. Like, the reality is you should have done this. You should have done this from the outset, right? That's part of your trial preparation. So if we can go and look at Ioan's trial brief. Here it is. And it's supposed to tell us what's at issue, what's not at issue. Okay, so child custody and visitations resolved, it's not at issue. Reached these agreements on these issues, the validity and enforceability of the premarital agreement, retirement plans, pendant lete attorney fees and costs. Those are like interim, temporary fees and costs. And here's the issues that are left for trial, right? So spousal support, restraining order, amount of guideline, child support, which now has also been taken off the table. So the restraining order has been addressed. We know spousal support and the identification, characterization, valuation of the community property and separate property, and then attorney fees and costs we know is being kicked down the road. So we got two issues here to talk about, right? Spousal support, characterization of assets. Your job in closing is to tell the judge what the judge is supposed to do, what's the applicable legal standard, and how does your evidence support that? And so to just make it as systematic as you can, he says, Ioan's request to terminate spousal support is on public policy grounds based on Alice's persistent and extensive domestic abuse of Ioan and her many violations of the permanent restraining order. His request to terminate based on her failure to heed the Gavron warning, and his request for support credits, overpayment, and then, yeah, so this kind of answers the judge's question. It looks like, as far as retroactivity, the court reserved jurisdiction to the time of trial to retroactively modify the temporary orders made back in September of 2024, together with any applicable legal or equitable consideration of his overpayment of spousal support under the premarital agreement. So you need to lay out for the judge, here's what all of the issues are. Here's my position on all of the issues. Here's the law that governs these issues. And here's how my evidence, here are the specific pieces of evidence I want you to look at that show why that legal standard goes in my favor. If you want to get real sophisticated, you can look at Janina's trial brief and her arguments and anticipate what she's going to be doing and, rebut them in advance, pre-but them. She's going to say this. Here's why she's wrong. Here's the case that says she's wrong. Here's the facts that say she's wrong. Here's where you'll find those facts. It's in these evidence. It's at this part of the transcript at this page. Your job in the closing is to make the decision-making process as easy as possible for the judge. Ideally, you want your closing to be a script that he could just go to the transcript and cut and paste it into his order. And he's done. That's all he needs. He's got all the law he needs. He's got all the evidence that he needs. It's cited. Any concerns about, positions that the other side has brought up have been anticipated. They've been addressed. It's been explained why, that doesn't apply, or that's not what the evidence was, or whatever. So this is kind of like a general explanation, but given what he had identified as as his particular, arguments, you need to establish the legal basis for the termination based on domestic abuse, because that's kind of a strategic decision, right? We need to know, is that just like a standalone public policy somewhere in the law that can be reconciled with the premarital agreement, not contemplating it? Or does that mean we have to kind of get out of the premarital agreement and just do support according to these other factors? That's a strategic decision that has to be made. So you need to research that. You need to know what the law is on that. The facts, that's already pretty well established. That's not going to be too hard to substantiate. You can rely on the judge's own ruling that he made in extending the DVRO. Her failure to heed the Gavron warning, that's going to be something that needs to be followed up on. What is the Gavron warning? What's it for? What's the expectation? What has she actually done? There was no, again, the judge asked these questions about her, her efforts that Janina followed up on, but Joe never did. So there was no like real challenge of why didn't you do this before, or, any kind of exploration about the gap between the reality of her plan and what she's expressing as how she's going to become self-sufficient. But I expect what Joe is going to do here, that's, like I said, one of the reasons why he brought up, your income from the conventions gets direct deposited into your account. That's because he can, in his closing, then go to the bank statements, say here, exhibit X on page, whatever, these all show the deposits that she got. So it shows this is how much she's made from conventions. And this is not enough to become, self-sustaining. So she needs to do something else. She knows she needs to do something else. And she hasn't even so much as called her agent. So she's not doing these other things. Then the support credits for overpayment. These, there isn't really a whole lot of issue of fact. I think they've stipulated, there was a stipulation. He overpaid. He should get credit for that. What does that mean? And then the retroactivity and any consideration of the $400,000, you got to have a, legal or equitable basis for the $400,000. And so if he's going to get credit for that, you need to explain to the court why. Here's how it's substantiated. And here's why it would not be fair for him to not get that credit. So generally speaking, that's the approach that I would be taking, and that more or less I expect the parties both to be taking as well. And so Janina's going to do the same thing, right? Janina's going to do the same thing. She's going to lean on the premarital agreement says support is forever, until remarriage. So there's no basis for getting out of it. If they want to get out of it, then they need to accept the, they're invoking the factors, and that's a take the sweet with the sour, that means they have to consider the other factors as well. So here's why those factors favor, Alice needs to get more education or training or whatever, although I don't think they have a good factual argument for that, since Alice said, I'm not doing that anyway. I can't be a teacher. Teachers early retire at 58. I can't be an interpreter. I tried for 3 days and didn't like it. So that's not feasible. They didn't really get a good record to establish that there is any kind of like training or something like that that she would be willing to do that would help her. But just the length of the marriage, and Alice was, primary caregiver of the children, and she didn't work as much, and she didn't earn as much, and so forth. The Janina, I think, is going to focus very heavily on the community property balance sheet issues, because they have the argument about the Horrors account, and really depending on how the Horrors account goes, is the difference between, Ioan owes Alice money versus Alice owes Ioan money. So So I expect her to go pretty hard on that. That's based on interpretation of language in the premarital agreement as well. So I think she's going to be focusing on that and arguing just because Alice deposited community funds doesn't mean the account isn't separate. So I very much hope Joe is prepared for that part of the argument because we talked about this last time. We looked at that provision in the premarital agreement. Just because it may not cause the entire asset to be recharacterized doesn't seem to me to be a excuse from having to account for the funds that were deposited into that account during the marriage. Because otherwise what you're saying is that you can convert community property into separate property by just putting it in your own account. And then like you could, you have joint access to things. So you could just empty the joint bank account, $500,000. Let's pull $500,000 out of the joint bank account and stick it in my separate account. And now it's all my separate property. Like that's not a reasonable interpretation of what that language means. So maybe what was there originally before you swiped the money from the joint account would still be your separate property, but the stuff you didn't change the character of what you put in by just putting it into your account. So I hope he is prepared for that argument because I do think that's potentially very important. The judge seemed by his comments to be going down this road of it's her separate property. So that needs to be elaborated on. LR 34893. Ioan was a well-respected and talented jobbing actor who did all right. Had Alice not set out to ruin his reputation and go scorched earth, she might still have the lifestyle she thinks she deserves. People told her this from day one. She was well aware of this from day one. She didn't care. What Alice wanted is really to have it every which way. I think in many ways, she wanted to be a victim, right? We see her consistently, looking to put herself in the victim role. This person, wrote it down wrong. This person did that. The agent wanted to fire me 4 years ago and didn't, but I have a grudge against him now for the last 3 weeks that affected what I did 6 months ago, She likes to put herself in the victim role. So I think this was maybe always inevitable. But I think what she really wanted is she wanted to put Ioan in the double bind situation where he is expected to support her at a certain level, and he is also unable to do so because she has ruined his career. She wanted to be that stress on him. And so the fact that she herself, is living at an impoverished level, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to her anyway, because what does she do? She lies in her bed and sits on social media. The only people that have been affected by Ioan's career decline have been her children. And she, seems pretty clear the priority that she gives to the social and educational and other types of needs of her children. So it's not like she didn't know this. It's not like she didn't know this. This was the point the entire time. But I'm still baffled at how, I don't know how you at one day testify, yes, it's just too hard. She spent years declaring herself as unemployed in these financial statements. And, making sure everybody, it's because it's hard to get work when you're an, elderly woman. And her plan still just seems to be somehow I'm going to get work as an elderly woman, notwithstanding that I have no record of getting acting work as an elderly woman for the last decade. Somehow just out of nowhere, lightning is going to strike and she's going to be the unicorn that proves the exception to the rule. Kind of feel like, all of this was foreseeable. This just goes back to Alice not really having a lot of long-term planning ability. She just cares about how do I feel right now and what will make me feel better if I smear them, if I yell at them, if I vent my spleen, whatever. And I get the satisfaction of damaging him and embarrassing him and hurting his career and so forth. That's all I need right now. And as far as what that implies down the road, it's like there's no real ability to process that or take responsibility, of course, for how her actions in the present tend to lead to those types of downstream consequences. So yeah, I think you're 100% correct on that. She could, and were she not so like personality dysfunctional, this is why probably like 90% of people, maybe, I don't know, I just made that up, but most people are able to get through divorce without it being all high conflict like this. Even among the high conflict ones, very few I think are as self-sabotaging as Alice is. She's a rather unique, train wreck. Oh, that's about all I got for today, guys. And we really, really wanted to be the bearer of better news about how the trial went and how it concluded and stuff like that. But no, boy, it was a real roller coaster this final day. Really getting jerked around with what even was this cross, like why did we even bother to do this cross, to why are we having Ioan impeach his own expert when the judge is telling you this might tank his entire case and you're going to do it anyway, to Alice just can't not lie and like make things worse for herself anytime she testifies. A lot of kind of getting jerked around. So I think the best thing to hope for is that the judge is able to put whatever those kind of interim judgments and things like that he's made aside on both accounts. Don't hold the lawyers against the parties. Don't hold it against them. Don't be mad at Ioan just because Joe was really annoying with how he presented this case. But at some point it's got to be it's Joe's responsibility to you can't expect the judge to do the work for you of figuring out why your client should get what you want them to. He has got to step up and make that case and do that job. And so as long as he can do that in closing, and I do have some faith. He did very well in the closing on the DVRO. So I do have faith in his ability to do that. And they of course have lots of time to prepare and so forth. And I think as long as they're able to do that, we can anticipate, I will never anticipate an ideal outcome, right? Not in court. This is court. It's always going to be something you don't like in some respect. It's kind of the nature of trial. They don't on purpose, but like you might sort of think like they do it on purpose, where it's kind of like mediation. You don't get everything that you want. They don't want to encourage people to go to trial by like giving people huge, massive, overarching wins. They want people to settle. And so part of the way that you do that is by issuing rulings that, give you less than you want, in the kind of nudge implication that, well, guess you should have settled. Maybe if you'd settled, you'd have gotten this other thing. So I don't expect, a total win or a dunk or, an overwhelming victory or anything like that at this stage. To the extent that was ever on the table, I think it was the DVRO. And so he's already got that. And that was extremely important. It may have been, frankly, the most important part of the case anyway, because that's the part that has been so damaging to him, right? And so now it seems like the public narrative has considerably shifted. Even the Daily Mail is like calling Alice out on her bullshit now. So if that's starting to become, he's kind of gotten rehabilitated through that process. And so maybe his career is going to improve at this point, to the extent that the real problem was Alice and her accusations and so forth. The fact that this has so publicly now gone against her and kind of revealed her as being, dishonest and everything and all of that. He might get a career resurgence. Who knows? Men have. I do tend to agree. Yes, men have a lot more privilege in things like acting and public facing stuff like that, where they age better, I guess. I know I've mentioned before, I got to see Ioan in the Seattle Symphony performance that he did. It was this program called the Antarctic Symphony. And what it was, I can't remember the name of the explorer now off the top of my head, but there was an Antarctic explorer from the 1920s and went down, with his crew on the ship, and they were doing all kinds of studies on the land and so forth. And they didn't make it. The whole crew died. But they have, they recovered from later expeditions and stuff, the journal from the captain of the ship. And so this production was, it was a, composition, these classical music, contemporary classical music compositions that were set to readings from the journals, and then photographs that were taken during this mission, photographs, of Antarctica and the sea and the ship and all these kinds of things. And so it was just this real, put you in this place and have this experience, this real immersive kind of program. And I enjoyed it so much. And I am not, let me be clear. I don't like contemporary classical music, like almost ever. I it's not my thing at all. I like my classical music, classical. Okay. Like give me my Mozart, give me my Chopin. I will tolerate some degree of Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. Okay. But you start getting too romantic, you're going to lose me. So it's not normally the type of thing that I would love. But it was really, really fantastic. And Ioan's reading of the journals, the ship captain journals, was a huge part of that. He's excellent at what he does. Just very, evocative, and you get the emotion, and you get like the wistfulness and the fear and the regrets and all this stuff. It was so well done. So he's extremely talented. And with all this stuff out of the picture, the reputation rehabilitation, he's still quite a good looking man. So, maybe this is just this part of the trial isn't necessarily from the big picture, the part that really matters the most anyway. If his career gets better, then he is in a better position. And so if he has to pay Alice a little bit, maybe we can live with that, even though, of course, it's not the ideal situation. But at least it being clear now publicly that he is not a cheater or a child abuser or all these other, terrible things that she was suggesting. Maybe that's the trade-off. So all in all, yeah, I think he has won just by winning the DVRO. But would be very nice. Would be very nice if he doesn't have to pay any spousal support. So regardless of how they get there, I do hope the judge gets there. Guys, I'm going to check out. I will let you know when I make a decision about being able to go down in May for the closings. I definitely would like to see it, but just not sure if I can, work that in schedule-wise. But I'll see what I can do. As far as other things coming up, oh boy, we've got, I fell behind on Tyler Robinson again. There's been some stuff with that. I got some things to say. I still have things to say about Afro Man. We're still wrapping up the Christy Martin series, the trial of Jim Martin. So I definitely have stuff in the hopper. Just at one of those points where it's like not enough hours in the day really to process all the stuff. Plus it's beautiful spring, and we're getting to that point where it's really nice to spend the time outside. But I do have lots of ideas. So as long as I can materialize those into something, then I do have expectations of some more offerings in the future. I also still have the prenup here. You know, we went through like some pieces of it, but might be helpful to go through the whole prenup and like take a look at it and see like here's what they're saying is ambiguous, and here's you know, my thoughts on it and stuff like that. So definitely got that on the radar as well. Always open to suggestions. Anything that you guys are interested in or want to hear from, or like a specific question, like, you know, Andrea, talk to me about this part of this case. Happy to consider that as well. So yeah, lots going on. It's an interesting time to be in LawTube. So with that, guys, do appreciate you all being here and your support. Thank you so much. So philosophy, I do feel so much better. I'm like basically normal again today. That's why I'm like I'm, you know, it was a food poisoning thing because it just like hit and then, you know, got better. It wasn't like a virus or anything like that. So I'm all better. I'm actually going to go hang out with my grandma this afternoon and this evening. So I'm going to be heading that way shortly. Appreciate Jeff and Kay, Forensic Fuhrer, the mods, all of you guys. Appreciate all of you. If you haven't headed over to Heidi Elkington Art on Instagram, I've got it linked in the channel description because she's the artist who did my fish and her amazing courtroom sketching. She has already put out, she finished her sketches for the day 10 that we were there. She did some for day 11 as well. So keep your eye out because those may be forthcoming. So that's about where we're at. It's about where we're at, guys. Hope you all have this is actually kind of a good time, isn't it? I realize because so many of the folks interested in this case are UK based, and like you guys are ready for bed now. I appreciate you joining me for this, and glad that this might have worked out a little bit better schedule wise for all of you. So thank you all very much for joining us. And oh, Jeff has told me in the private chat, by the way, that the explorer that was in the Antarctic Symphony was Captain Robert Falcon Scott, if you're interested in that. I'm sure he's got a Wikipedia or whatever. So yeah, the sketches, the Robert Scott, all that stuff. Anything you want to follow up on. James Fallon, continue to recommend The Psychopath Inside. Really was a fascinating read. So guys, thank you all again. Appreciate all of you. Happy to field any questions or suggestions or anything like that. Do have been a little bit slow on the Substack side of things these days, but I do plan to pick that back up as well. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to do that as well. And I'm now going to go enjoy a beautiful afternoon with my grandma, guys. Thank you again. Appreciate all of you. Stay tuned for what's coming next, and I will see you next time.